Hello guys, welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Ash conquered the battle frontier and Scott awarded him a harem of frontier brains. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The King and His Crown. The air was a razor. It tasted of ozone, freezing mist, and the raw, planetary cold of a Pokemon that had slumbered since the Ice Age. Every cheer from the stadium beyond the battlefield was a distant, muffled drumbeat, irrelevant noise against the symphony of destruction playing out before Ash Ketchum. Regice, the last and most formidable of Brandon's legendary titans, hovered in the center of the cratered arena. It was less a living creature and more a monument of primordial frost, its crystalline body refracting the stadium lights into 1,000 hostile glints. A low hum emanated from its core, a sound that vibrated deep in the bone and promised absolute zero. Opposite it, panting heavily on a newly formed sheet of slick ice, was Pikachu. Ash's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic rhythm that matched the frantic, desperate thoughts racing through his mind. Sceptile, Swellow, Corphish, Torkoal, and even the indomitable Charizard had fought with more heart and power than he had ever seen, but Brandon's titans were on another level. They were forces of nature given form, and Brandon commanded them with the serene, unshakable confidence of a man who didn't just train legends, he understood them. "You have done well to come this far, Ash," Brandon's voice boomed, carrying effortlessly across the ruined field. The frontier brain stood with his arms crossed, a silhouette of unflinching authority. "Few have ever pushed my Regis to this extent. But this is the end of the line. Regice, lock on." The 7 red dots on Regis' face glowed in unison, fixing on Pikachu with an unholy intensity. A targeting reticle, invisible but palpably felt, settled over Ash's oldest friend. There would be no dodging the next attack. "Pikachu, get ready to move." Ash yelled, his voice raw. "Pika." The little mouse's ears twitched, his body tensed like a coiled spring, his eyes never leaving the behemoth of ice. He was exhausted. Ash could feel it through their bond, a deep, aching weariness that mirrored his own. They were running on fumes and stubbornness. A futile effort, Brandon stated, not with arrogance, but with the calm certainty of a mathematician solving an equation. The next blow will land. Its trajectory is absolute. Ice beam. Regis' body flared with a blinding, cyan light. The temperature in the stadium plummeted. The breath plumed from Ash's mouth in a thick cloud. A beam of pure, concentrated cold, wider than a man, erupted from the Titan and shot across the field. It wasn't just an attack, it was a physical manifestation of winter's wrath, freezing the very air it passed through, leaving a trail of hanging ice crystals in its wake. "Now! Volt tackle, straight at it!" Ash roared, a desperate, insane command. A gasp went through the crowd. Even Brandon's stoic expression flickered with surprise. Rushing headlong into an unavoidable ice beam was suicide. But Pikachu trusted him. Without a flicker of hesitation, he was wreathed in a blinding torrent of golden electricity and shot forward. He didn't try to evade. He became a thunderbolt aimed at the heart of the blizzard. The two attacks met. For a heart-stopping second, there was only light, the furious, chaotic gold of electricity against the cold, unyielding blue of the ice. The collision was immense, a deafening shriek of elemental fury that drowned out every other sound. Steam and lightning exploded outwards in a dome of raw power. "He's using the Volt tackle to bore through it," a voice shrieked from the VIP box. It was Scott, the owner of the battle frontier, leaning so far over the railing he threatened to fall. "The sheer heat is melting a path." It was a gamble. Born of a decade of battles. A standard ice beam was a continuous stream of energy. If Pikachu could just weather the initial impact and maintain his momentum, he could use the thermal shock of his own attack to carve a tunnel through the frozen onslaught. Through the swirling chaos, Ash saw it. A tiny, golden comet fighting its way through the celestial blue. Pikachu's cheeks sparked violently, pouring more and more power into the effort, his body screaming in protest. The ice beam was still pushing him back, the cold seeping through his electrical shield, slowing him down. More. A little more, Pikachu. Ash yelled, pouring his own hope, his own energy, his own desperation into their bond. He pushed his fist forward as if he could physically shove his partner through the wall of ice. You can do it. A defiant "Chuuuuuuuu" echoed from the heart of the storm. The golden light intensified, a final, defiant surge. Pikachu broke through. He emerged from the other side of the ice beam, flickering and smoking but still rocketing forward. He was on Regice before the Titan could react. Now, Iron Tail. Ash commanded. Still wrapped in the dregs of the Volt Tackle's electricity, Pikachu's tail flashed, hardening into a chrome-like sheen. He spun in the air, a maneuver they had practiced 1,000 times, turning his forward momentum into a devastating vertical swing. The metal-hard tail slammed down directly onto the central red eye of Regis' face. There was a sound like a glacier calving. A high-pitched, harmonic shriek that vibrated through the air. A spiderweb of cracks erupted from the point of impact, spreading across Regis' crystalline face. The light in its eyes flickered, dimmed, and then went out. The colossal golem tilted, its low hum falling silent for the first time since the battle began. With a ground-shaking groan, it slumped forward, its massive arms falling limp at its sides. It was still. Silence. The stadium held its breath. The referee, who had been huddled behind a rock outcropping, slowly straightened up, his eyes wide. He stared at the unmoving Titan, then at the small, yellow Pokémon panting on the ground before it. Pikachu swayed, the last of his energy gone. His legs buckled. Pikachu. Ash was already moving, sprinting across the treacherous, ice-slicked field. He slid the last few feet on his knees, scooping his partner up just before he hit the ground. Pikachu was limp in his arms, his fur singed, his body trembling with exhaustion. He managed a weak Pika. And nuzzled into Ash's chest. You did it, buddy, Ash whispered, his voice thick with emotion, burying his face in his partner's fur. You did it. We did it. The referee finally found his voice. He raised his flag. Regice is unable to battle. The winner, and therefore the new conqueror of the battle frontier, is Ash Ketchum of Pallet Town. The silence broke. The roar from the crowd was a physical force, a tidal wave of sound that washed over the field. It was a chaotic, joyous, explosive celebration. But for Ash, holding his best friend, the entire world had narrowed to that single, quiet moment of victory. He had done it. After all the gyms, all the leagues, all the losses and the triumphs, he had finally conquered a mountain. Brandon recalled his fainted Regice, the red beam of light pulling the Titan back into its pokeball with a quiet sigh. He walked across the field, his heavy boots crunching on the shattered ice. He stopped before Ash, his shadow falling over the boy and his Pokémon. Ash looked up, cradling Pikachu protectively. Brandon's face was unreadable, carved from the same stoic stone as his Regis. For a moment, Ash thought he might be angry. Then, the Pyramid King smiled. It was a small thing, just a crinkle at the edges of his eyes and a slight upturn of his lips, but it was genuine. A battle of spirit and will, a perfect embodiment of the bond between a trainer and his Pokémon, he said, his deep voice filled with a surprising warmth. You did not simply defeat me, Ash Ketchum. You surpassed the challenge of the battle frontier. You have earned my deepest respect. He extended a hand. Ash, carefully shifting Pikachu to one arm, took it. Brandon's grip was as firm and unyielding as granite. Congratulations. The official ceremony was held an hour later, in the grand, opulent hall at the heart of the Battle Frontier complex. Sunlight streamed through the high, arched windows, illuminating the polished marble floors and the massive banners of the 7 frontier facilities hanging from the ceiling. The air buzzed with excitement. Reporters and dignitaries lined the walls, their cameras flashing like a swarm of Volbeat. Ash stood on a raised dais, Pikachu now perched on his shoulder, looking much better after a potion and a brief rest. He had changed into a clean set of clothes, but he still felt the phantom aches of the battle. His entire team stood with him in spirit, their pokeballs heavy and reassuring on his belt. Before him, in a formidable line, stood the 6 other frontier brains he had defeated to get here. They were an intimidating bunch. Noland, the factory head, gave him a friendly, analytical smile, his eyes still sparkling with curiosity about Ash's unique battle style. Greta, the arena tycoon, stood with her arms crossed, her expression fierce and appraising, a challenging glint in her eyes that never seemed to fade. Tucker, the dome ace, struck a flamboyant pose, offering a theatrical wink. Lucy, the pike queen, leaned against a marble pillar slightly apart from the others, her movements fluid and serpentine, her gaze cool and difficult to read. Spencer, the palace maven, had a serene, almost mystical calm about him. And Annabelle, the salon maiden, watched him with a unique intensity, her large, expressive eyes seeming to look past his physical form and into something deeper. Ash felt a familiar, faint psychic hum from her direction, a gentle presence he'd grown accustomed to during their battle. At the center of the dais, at a grand podium, stood Scott. He was beaming, his trademark grin stretching from ear to ear, his brightly colored shirt a beacon of chaotic energy in the formal hall. Ladies, gentlemen, trainers of all ages. Scott's voice boomed, amplified by the hall's acoustics. Today is a historic day. We have gathered to celebrate a monumental achievement. A trainer who embodies the very spirit of the battle frontier, courage, innovation, and an unbreakable bond with his Pokémon. He gestured dramatically to Ash. This young man, Ash Ketchum from Pallet Town, has done what so many have tried and failed to do. He has journeyed through Kanto, faced our 7 most powerful frontier brains, and has emerged, through skill and sheer force of will, victorious. A wave of applause swept through the hall. Ash felt a flush of heat rise to his cheeks, but he stood straight, Pikachu letting out a proud "cha" from his shoulder. He has collected the knowledge symbol, the gut symbol, the tactic symbol, the luck symbol, the spirit symbol, the ability symbol, and just 1 hour ago, the brave symbol. Scott continued, his voice rising with excitement. He has, by all rights, conquered the battle frontier. Scott paused, letting the statement hang in the air. He clasped his hands behind his back and his expression shifted from showman to something far more serious. The energy in the room changed with him. But, what does that truly mean? He asked, his voice now lower, more deliberate. For decades, the battle frontier has operated under a simple premise. Conquer it, and you are offered a position as a frontier brain yourself. A chance to become a legend, to test the next generation of challengers. He turned and looked directly at Ash. Ash Ketchum. I could offer you that. We could build you your own facility. The Ash Ketchum battle something or other, he said with a brief, dismissive wave of his hand. But to do so would be an insult. An insult to what you have actually accomplished. A murmur rippled through the assembled brains. Greta's arms tightened, her brow furrowing. Lucy pushed herself off the pillar, her full attention now on Scott. The rules of the frontier are ancient, Scott said, his voice resonating with a newfound gravity. Older than the Pokémon League itself. The offer of a brain position is for those who win through conventional means, for those who are strong and clever. But the oldest statutes speak of a different outcome, for a different kind of victor. One who doesn't just defeat the brains, but inspires them. One who doesn't just win with power, but with a bond so profound it borders on the mystical. A victor who reminds us that the frontier is not just a series of challenges, but a shield. He took a deep breath. By defeating all 7 brains with a spirit and power that fulfills the oldest tenets of our charter, you have not just earned a job, Ash. You have unlocked a legacy. Scott stepped away from the podium and walked towards Ash. He stopped before him, the smile gone, replaced by an expression of immense solemnity. The battle frontier is more than an elite challenge. It is the first line of defense for this region against threats that the League, with its rules and its bureaucracy, is not equipped to handle. Esoteric threats. Unprecedented crises. Things that stir in the dark places of the world. He gestured to the line of brains. These are not just powerful trainers. They are specialists. Noland, a master of technology and mechanics. Annabelle, a psychic of incredible power, capable of communicating with Pokemon on a level most cannot comprehend. Greta, a master of combat strategy. Lucy, an expert in unconventional tactics and survival in hostile environments. Each of them is a weapon, a shield, a guardian. But they are a force without a commander. Scott's eyes locked onto Ash's. Until now. The ancient title, dormant for centuries, is Frontier Warden, Scott declared, his voice ringing with authority. The Warden does not serve the frontier. The Warden commands the frontier. They lead its brains. They direct its resources. They are the final authority in the face of a true crisis. Their reward is not a facility. It is responsibility. It is command. He raised his hand and pointed it squarely at Ash. Ash Ketchum of Pallet Town. As per the most ancient laws of the battle frontier, I do not offer you a position among our ranks. I offer you command over them. I anoint you the new frontier warden. The hall fell into a stunned, absolute silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the light fixtures. The reporters had forgotten to take pictures. Ash's mind went blank. Command. Command them. He looked at the line of frontier brains. At Brandon, who stood like a statue, his expression unreadable. At Greta, whose shock had morphed into pure, undiluted disbelief, her mouth slightly agape. At Lucy, whose eyes had narrowed into sharp, analytical slits, her gaze piercing as she assessed him not as a challenger, but as something new and entirely unexpected. Annabelle's psychic hum spiked, a jolt of surprise and something else, validation. She looked as if Scott had just spoken a deep truth she was only now recognizing. This was insane. He was a Pokemon trainer. He traveled, he battled, he made friends. He wasn't a commander. He wasn't a king. The idea was so preposterous, so far beyond anything he had ever imagined, that he almost laughed. But then he looked at Scott's face. There was no hint of a joke. This was real. He felt Pikachu's shift on his shoulder, pressing his head against Ash's cheek, a silent gesture of support. He thought of his Pokemon. Charizard, Sceptile, all of them. They had followed him, trusted him. He had led them into battle time and time again. Maybe this wasn't so different. It was just bigger. So much bigger. The weight of it settled on him. It was a physical thing, a pressure on his shoulders. Command them. Be responsible for them. For the safety of the region. It was terrifying. It was overwhelming. And it was a challenge. The biggest one he had ever faced. He looked past the brains, past Scott, to the cheering crowd. They saw him as a hero, a champion. He looked at the banners hanging from the ceiling, symbols of the power he had overcome. And he looked at the line of brains, these incredible, powerful individuals, now looking at him, waiting. He met Scott's gaze. His mind, once a whirlwind of shock, was suddenly clear. Calm. Decisive. I accept, Ash said. His voice didn't waver. It was quiet, but it carried across the silent hall with absolute certainty. The spell was broken. Scott's face split into a triumphant grin. The crowd, catching on, erupted into a roar that dwarfed the one at the stadium. The brains stirred, whispering amongst themselves, their expressions a mixture of shock, skepticism, and dawning curiosity. Greta just shook her head, muttering something under her breath. Lucy simply watched him, her expression unreadable as ever, but her posture had changed. She was no longer relaxed, but poised, like a savaper ready to strike. Amid the chaos, Ash felt a gentle tug on his sleeve. He turned to see Annabel standing beside him, her usual shyness overshadowed by a deep, palpable concern. The noise of the celebration seemed to fade around them. "Ash," she said, her voice barely a whisper, yet it cut through the din while Scott was speaking. "I felt something." Ash gave her his full attention. "Felt something? What do you mean?" Her eyes, a deep and troubled violet, searched his. "I am always connected, in a small way, to the emotional and psychic energy of the region. It's like a quiet song that's always playing." But just now, as the title of warden was named, a note went silent. "Silent?" Ash asked, frowning. "Not silent," she corrected herself, struggling to find the words. "That's not right. It was erased. A hole. A single point, far to the north, in the direction of Sinnoh. For a moment it was like a part of the world just stopped existing. There was no life, no energy, no emotion. Just nothingness. A perfect, terrifying void where a part of the song should be." She shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. "I've felt anger, sadness, fear from Pokemon and people. I've never felt nothing before. It was cold. It was wrong." Ash looked at her, then looked past her at the celebrating crowd, completely oblivious. He looked at the powerful brains, now his responsibility. He was the frontier warden. A protector. A shield. His victory celebration had lasted less than 5 minutes. The first tremor of his new duty was already being felt. The mountain he had just climbed was revealed to be nothing more than a foothill. A new, far larger, and far darker one loomed on the horizon. And from the sound of it, something was already stirring. In its shadow. Chapter 2, The Challenge from the North. The first 48 hours of Ash's tenure as frontier warden were a whirlwind of disorientation. He found himself moved from the simple guest quarters to a sprawling suite at the apex of the central tower, a space with panoramic windows that overlooked the entire frontier complex. It felt less like a bedroom and more like an observation deck. He spent most of his time in what Scott called the Nexus, a high-tech command center 1 floor below his suite, dominated by a circular table with 7 seats and a vast, wraparound screen that could display maps, battle analytics, and live feeds from any of the facilities. It was in the Nexus that the new power dynamic became starkly, uncomfortably real. The brains would file in for daily briefings, their attitudes a jarring spectrum of reactions. Noland was fascinated, peppering Ash with questions about his battle with Brandon, eager to dissect the physics of a volt tackle boring through an ice beam. Spencer was placid and accepting, as if this was all a part of some grand cosmic tapestry he could already see. Tucker was, if anything, even more theatrical, calling Ash Commander-in-Chief and striking poses. The friction, however, was palpable from the other three. Brandon, a man of immense presence, was professionally reserved. He addressed Ash as warden with a formal correctness that was almost colder than open hostility. He would listen, offer his opinion when asked, but his posture screamed that he was observing, judging, and waiting for Ash to fail. Annabel, while supportive, was clearly struggling. Her psychic sensitivity made the tension in the room a constant, low-grade headache, and she was still deeply troubled by the psychic void she had felt, which had not returned but had left an indelible scar on her senses. But the most overt resistance came from Greta. "It's a publicity stunt," she said on the second morning, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. They were alone in the Nexus, save for Pikachu dozing on the central table. Ash had been studying topographical maps of the region, trying to understand the strategic importance of the frontier's layout. Ash looked up from the holographic display. Scott seemed pretty serious. "Scott's a showman," Greta shot back, leaning her palms on the table. She was a coiled spring of muscle and fierce energy. "He loves a good story." And what's a better story than the plucky kid becoming king? But a title is just a word, Ash. Leadership is earned in the field. It's earned through command, through making the hard calls when lives are on the line. You've proven you're a great battler. You haven't proven you can lead us. Pikachu's ear twitched, and he opened one eye, sensing the conflict. Ash met her intense gaze without flinching. He didn't get defensive. He didn't argue. He simply nodded. You're right. I haven't. His simple agreement took the wind out of her sails. She had been braced for a fight, an argument, some display of ego. The quiet acceptance was disarming. So you admit it? There's nothing to admit, Ash said, turning back to the map. You're stating a fact. I have to earn your trust. And Brandon's. And Lucy's. I know that. He pointed to a spot on the map, a rugged mountain range to the northwest. Scott said the facilities are built on ley line convergences. Is that true? Greta blinked, thrown by the sudden shift in topic. Yes. The Battle Palace is situated on one of the strongest. It's why the Pokémon there are so vibrant. So if someone wanted to disrupt the frontier, Ash mused, tracing a line on the hologram, they wouldn't attack the facilities directly. They'd go for the lines connecting them. The weak points in between. Before Greta could respond, the doors to the Nexus slid open with a soft hiss. A figure stood silhouetted against the bright light of the corridor. He was tall, lean, and carried himself with an aura of supreme, dismissive arrogance that Ash recognized instantly. The purple hair, the dark, intense eyes, the jacket slung over his shoulders, it was a sight that brought back a flood of memories from his journey through Sinnoh. So this is the command center for the Kanto sideshow, Paul said, his voice dripping with condescension. He let his gaze sweep over the room, from the advanced technology to Greta's formidable presence, before it finally settled on Ash. A small, humorless smirk touched his lips. I heard a rumor so ridiculous I had to come see it for myself. They actually put you in charge. Greta's back stiffened. She turned, her entire body language radiating hostility. And who are you? Irrelevant, Paul said, not even bothering to look at her. His focus was entirely on Ash. I beat their champion. I traveled their region. I know what strength looks like. And this, he gestured vaguely at the room, isn't it? It's a glorified theme park. And you're its mascot. Paul, Ash said, his voice even. The old anger that Paul used to so easily provoke was gone, replaced by a weary sort of clarity. What do you want? What I've always wanted, Paul replied, taking a step into the room. To test myself against real power. To expose weakness. I came all this way from Sinnoh because I can't accept it. The idea that you, of all people, could conquer this place and be given command, it's a flaw in the logic of the world. It has to be a mistake. He stopped a few feet from the table. I'm here to correct it. Greta took a step forward. You're in no position to issue challenges here. I'm not challenging a brain, Paul sneered, the word dripping with sarcasm. I'm challenging him. Their warden. If he's truly the strongest, if he's truly the leader, he'll face me. If not, then this whole institution is a farce, and it deserves to crumble. Ash held up a hand, and Greta stopped, looking at him with surprise. What are the terms? Ash asked Paul directly. A genuine, predatory smile spread across Paul's face. He had him. A full 6-on-6 battle. No time limits. No substitutions on the fly unless a Pokémon faints. But not in a stadium. Not on your pampered, manicured fields. He pointed a thumb over his shoulder, towards the distant mountains visible through the window. Up there. In the Serpent's Tooth Range. We start at the base and battle our way to the summit. The first one to have all 6 of their Pokémon unable to continue loses. The terrain, the weather, the altitude, it's all part of the battlefield. A true test of strategy and endurance, not just flashy moves. Greta's eyes widened slightly. The serpent's tooth was notoriously treacherous. Rockslides, sudden blizzards, dizzying heights, it was a place that broke trainers. Paul hadn't just chosen a location, he had chosen a weapon. You want to prove I can lead? Ash said, turning to look at Greta. This is a tactical challenge. A test of preparation and command under pressure. It's perfect. He looked back at Paul. I accept your challenge. Tomorrow. Sunrise. Paul's smile solidified. I'll be waiting. He turned on his heel and walked out without another word, the doors hissing shut behind him, leaving a tense silence in his wake. Greta stared at Ash, a new emotion warring with the skepticism in her eyes. It looked like respect. You didn't have to take that bait. He was trying to provoke you. He did, Ash admitted. But he's also right. This isn't just a battle. It's a statement. And it's my first real decision as warden. He turned and tapped a command on the central table. A high-resolution 3D map of the serpent's tooth range materialized in the air. Now, tell me everything you know about this mountain. The rest of the day was a masterclass in focused preparation. Ash convened a formal strategy session, a move that surprised everyone. He brought Noland and Greta into the Nexus, and to their shock, Lucy appeared as well, invited by Ash. She glided into the room and took a seat in the corner, silent and watchful, her presence a cool, unsettling constant. Noland, I need a full environmental workup, Ash began, his tone all business. Weather. Probabilities, wind shear at different altitudes, geological instabilities, known wild Pokémon habitats. Everything. Nolan's eyes lit up. This was his element. Of course, Warden. I can run atmospheric simulations and cross-reference them with satellite imagery. I'll have a probability model for you within the hour. He set to work at a side console, fingers flying across a holographic keyboard. Greta, Ash continued, turning to her. Stamina and endurance. The altitude will drain my Pokémon faster. What are the best training regimens for rapid acclimatization? What physical warning signs should I look for? Greta, clearly impressed by the directness and specificity of the questions, stepped up to the holographic map. The air thins past the 3,000-foot mark. Your Pokémon will fatigue 20% faster. 30% if they're using high-energy attacks. The key is burst and rest. Short, overwhelming offense followed by a tactical retreat to conserve energy. For training, we can use the gravity simulators in my facility's training rooms. An hour in there at 1.5 GS will simulate the strain of high-altitude combat. 4 hours, they worked. Nolan produced a stunningly detailed report, highlighting 3 specific zones on the mountain: a narrow, debris-choked ascent prone to rockslides, a wide, windswept plateau with sparse cover, and the treacherous, crumbling final summit known for its unpredictable blizzards. Greta, in turn, put Ash's chosen team, Charizard, Sceptile, Glisker, Bizel, Staraptor, and Infernape, through a grueling, customized training regimen. She was a brutal but effective taskmaster, pushing them to their limits and beyond. Through it all, Ash was the calm center of the storm. He wasn't just taking their advice, he was synthesizing it. He looked at Nolan's rockslide data and formulated an ambush strategy. He listened to Greta's advice on burst and rest and tailored it to Infernape's explosive fighting style. He was calm, decisive, and completely in command. From her corner, Lucy watched, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She saw the way Ash absorbed the information, the way he translated raw data into actionable battle plans. She saw the way Greta's initial skepticism was melting away, replaced by a focused, professional respect. She didn't say a word, but a flicker of something, intrigue, perhaps, danced in her gaze. As the sun set, Ash stood before the final strategy board, his team for the next day chosen and their roles assigned. Thank you, he said to Noland and Greta. Your help has been invaluable. Just providing the data, Warden, Noland said with a grin. Greta simply nodded, the gesture holding more weight than any platitude. Your strategy is sound. Don't let him get in your head. Execute the plan. As they left, Ash felt a presence behind him. It was Lucy. She had moved from her corner without making a sound. He's chosen a battlefield where ruthlessness is an advantage, she said, her voice a low murmur. He believes your greatest strength, your bond with your Pokémon, is a weakness in a place like that. He thinks you'll hesitate to put them at risk. Ash looked at the image of the treacherous summit. He's wrong. Lucy held his gaze for a long moment, then a slow, serpentine smile touched her lips. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a smile of appraisal, of seeing a fellow predator. Show him. The next morning, the air at the base of the serpent's tooth was thin and cold. The mountain loomed over them, a jagged spear of granite aimed at the pale sky. Paul was already there, standing with his arms crossed, his 6 pokeballs clipped to his belt. He looked completely at home in the harsh environment. Ash arrived, Pikachu on his shoulder as always, but he knew Pikachu wouldn't be part of this fight. This was for his chosen 6. A referee from the frontier, a man named Taggart, stood between them, looking nervous. The rules are as agreed, Taggart announced. 6 on 6. The battle will proceed up the designated path. A Pokémon is eliminated when I declare it unable to battle. The trainer with the last Pokémon standing wins. Begin. Paul's first move was immediate. Agron, stand your ground. The ground shook as the massive steel/rock type materialized. It was a fortress of a Pokémon, perfectly suited to this terrain. A defensive opening, Ash murmured. He wants me to waste energy trying to break through. He pulled out his own Pokeball. Staraptor, I choose you. The valiant bird appeared in a flash of light, soaring into the sky with a sharp cry. An air battle on a narrow path? Foolish, Paul scoffed. Agron, use Stone Edge. Agron slammed its foot down, and pillars of sharp rock erupted from the ground, racing towards Staraptor. Don't engage them. Ash commanded. Use the updrafts. Gain altitude. Staraptor expertly navigated the drafts Noland had mapped out, weaving between the stone pillars and climbing higher and higher until it was just a speck. He's running. Paul sneered. He's positioning, Ash corrected. Now, Staraptor. Noland's data said this area was unstable. Target the cliff face above him. Use close combat. Staraptor dove. It wasn't aiming for Agron. It descended like a meteor, its claws and beak glowing with fighting energy, and slammed into the rock wall directly above Paul and his Pokémon. The mountain groaned. A shower of pebbles turned into a cascade of boulders. A rock slide. What? Paul yelled, his composure finally breaking. He had to recall a stunned Agron instantly to save it from being buried. You'd risk collapsing the path. You chose the battlefield, Paul, Ash called out from across the chasm of falling rock. I'm just using it. The first stage was a brutal, tactical game of cat and mouse. Ash sacrificed Staraptor's energy not for a knockout, but to reshape the battlefield, forcing Paul to expend his Ursaring stamina to clear a new path. Ash countered with Bizel, whose Aqua Jet allowed him to navigate the treacherous, newly formed terrain with ease, scoring a quick, decisive victory against the tired bear Pokémon before falling to Paul's next choice, his lightning-fast Weevil. They reached the plateau, a wide-open expanse of windswept rock. Ash was down 1 Pokémon, Paul down 1. Now your terrain tricks are useless, Paul said, his Weevil dancing on the balls of its feet. This is a battle of speed and power. Electivire, stand by. Paul's infamous powerhouse emerged, crackling with electricity, its twin tails whipping through the air. The air smelled of ozone. Speed and power, Ash repeated. He recalled Bizel and pulled out another pokeball. I have that too. Sceptile, I choose you. The battle on the plateau was ferocious. Paul's Weevil and Sceptile were a blur of motion, a clash of ice and grass-type attacks at impossible speeds. Sceptile, following Greta's burst and rest doctrine, used the sparse rock formations for cover, launching flurries of leaf blades before disappearing again. It was a hard-fought battle, but Sceptile's endurance training paid off, and Weevil eventually fell. But then came Electivire. Paul's ace was a monster. It weathered Sceptile's attacks and took it down with a thunderous thunder punch. Ash sent out Glisker, using its flight and mastery of the wind currents Noland had predicted to wage a frustrating war of attrition. Glisker dodged and weaved, peppering Electivire with X-Scissor and Stone Edge from above. It was a masterful display of aerial combat, but one mistake was all it took. Electivire caught Glisker's tail with one of its own and slammed it into the ground, finishing it with a Giga Impact. 2 down for Paul. 3 down for Ash. They were nearing the summit, and Ash was at a disadvantage. The final stage was the crumbling peak. The wind was a physical force, howling and driving shards of ice through the air. The temperature had dropped precipitously. Paul had recalled Electivire to conserve its energy, leaving his rock-solid Torterra to hold the peak. It's over, Ash, Paul yelled over the wind. Your Pokémon are exhausted. My Torterra is a living mountain. You can't move it. Ash looked at his remaining Pokémon, Charizard and Infernape. Both were tired, the altitude and cold taking their toll. Charizard, it's all you. Ash yelled. The fire dragon emerged with a defiant roar, a beacon of flame against the gray, frozen landscape. The battle that followed was titanic. A clash of fire and earth, dragon against tortoise. Charizard's flames were hampered by the thin air and biting wind, while Torterra was in its element. It was a battle of pure, primal power. In the end, they took each other out, a final, explosive flare blitz meeting a cataclysmic frenzy plant, leaving both Pokémon unable to continue in a smoking, vine-choked crater. 4 down for Paul. 4 down for Ash. It came down to this. Ash had Infernape. Paul had his Aggron, which had recovered from the initial shock, and his powerhouse, Electivire. 2 against 1, Paul stated, the wind whipping his hair. Your last stand. How pathetically predictable. Infernape, let's go. Infernape burst from his ball, his fists wreathed in flame, his eyes burning with fighting spirit. The battle was a desperate struggle for survival. Infernape was faster than Aggron, dodging its heavy attacks and landing powerful mock punches, but he couldn't break its defense. Paul fought with cold, brutal efficiency, swapping Aggron out for Electivire at the perfect moment. Infernape, already tired, was facing Paul's strongest Pokémon. Electivire was relentless. It pressed the attack, landing a devastating thunder punch that sent Infernape skidding across the ice. Infernape struggled to its feet, swaying. Finish it, Electivire. Thunder. Paul commanded. A massive bolt of lightning descended from the heavens, striking Infernape head-on. The 8 Pokémon cried out, engulfed in raw electricity, and collapsed. Infernape is, the referee started to say. No. Ash yelled. Get up, Infernape. I know you can. On the ground, something stirred. Infernape's eyes snapped open, glowing with a fierce, red light. The flames on its head erupted, growing to 3 times their normal size. A roar of pure, untamed power echoed across the summit, a sound so primal it made the mountain itself seem to tremble. Blaze. The last resort of a desperate trainer, Paul scoffed, though a flicker of unease crossed his face. It's just mindless power. Electivire, contain it. Protect. Electivire threw up a green barrier just as Infernape shot forward, a blur of motion. Don't just attack. Use the terrain. Ash yelled, his voice in perfect sync with his Pokémon's rage. Dig. Instead of slamming into the barrier, Infernape dove into the ground, its flaming hands carving through rock and ice like it was water. The ground beneath Electivire trembled. "It's coming up underneath you." Paul realized too late. Infernape erupted from the ground directly below Electivire, a geyser of fire and fury. The uppercut, empowered by Blaze and Mach Punch, was unstoppable. It sent the massive electric Pokémon flying into the air. "Now, Flare Blitz!" Ash roared. Infernape became a living comet, engulfing itself in a vortex of blue-hot fire and slamming into the airborne Electivire. The mid-air explosion was blinding. When the light cleared, Electivire was falling, unconscious. It crashed to the ground, out cold. Paul recalled it, his expression a mask of disbelief. He sent out his last Pokémon, the battered Agron. But it was no contest. The blaze-empowered Infernape was a force of nature. A single, focused flare blitz shattered Agron's armor and ended the battle. Silence descended on the peak, broken only by the howl of the wind and Infernape's heavy panting, the flames on its head slowly receding. Ash had won. He ran to Infernape's side, supporting his exhausted Pokémon. Paul stood across the peak, staring, not with anger, but with a profound, grudging confusion. Ash hadn't won with just friendship. He hadn't won with just raw power. He had won with strategy, with preparation, with ruthless use of the environment, and with a bond that allowed him to control a power Paul had dismissed as mindless. From a vantage point below the summit, Greta lowered her binoculars. She had watched the entire battle. She watched Ash use her stamina tactics, Nolan's environmental data, and his own insane brand of courage to achieve the impossible. She turned to Lucy, who stood beside her. Lucy's expression was unreadable as always, but her eyes were fixed on Ash. "He didn't hesitate," she said softly. Greta didn't reply. She just gave a single, sharp nod of approval. Back at the summit, as the referee declared Ash the winner, Paul finally spoke. "How?" "You said it yourself, Paul," Ash said, helping Infernape stay upright. A true test of strategy and endurance. He had proven his point. Suddenly, a comms unit on the referee's belt crackled to life. It was Scott's voice, tinny and laced with panic. "Taggart. Is the warden with you? We have a priority 1 alert. A security breach." "What is it?" Ash called out, his victory forgotten. "It's the Snowpoint Temple in Sinnoh." Scott's voice was frantic. "Something just broke in. The psychic sensors we have monitoring the area just went dead. Annabelle felt it from here, it's the same void as before, but bigger. The entire temple is, psychically dead. Whatever it is, it's disturbed Regigigas." Paul froze. Sinnoh. Snowpoint Temple. He knew that place. He knew the legend of the colossal Pokémon that slept there. But it was the description that made his blood run cold. Cold. Efficient. A device that didn't just steal or destroy, but erased. It was a perversion of the very philosophy of strength he held dear. It wasn't a show of power, it was the negation of it. It was an attack on the very concept of existence. And it was happening in his home region. For the first time in a long time, Paul looked at Ash not as a rival, but as the only person present who might understand the chilling, unnatural wrongness of what was happening. The challenge from the north had just taken on a terrifying new meaning. Chapter 3, The Silent Siege. The victory against Paul felt like a lifetime ago, a fleeting moment of personal triumph erased by the harsh crackle of Scott's voice over the comm. The chopper ride down from the Serpent's Tooth was a tense, rattling descent into a brewing storm. Ash sat strapped in, the wind whipping through the open bay doors, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Across from him, Paul was unerringly still, his usual arrogance replaced by a cold, sharp focus that was almost more intimidating. The threat was in his homeland. For Paul, this was no longer theoretical, it was personal. They barely touched the ground before they were running, sprinting across the tarmac towards the central tower. The air of the Battle Frontier complex, usually vibrant and alive with the energy of countless powerful Pokémon, felt thin, strained, like a string pulled taut to its breaking point. The doors to the Nexus hissed open to reveal a scene of controlled chaos. Every Frontier brain was present. Noland was at a console, his face illuminated by scrolling lines of code. Greta paced like a caged Mytiana. Brandon stood like a granite statue, his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on the main screen. Scott was clutching a phone, his face pale and drawn. And in the center of the room, seated at the large circular table, was Annabelle. She had one hand pressed to her temple, her eyes squeezed shut. Her skin was ashen. As Ash entered, a wave of psychic static seemed to roll off her, a feeling like pins and needles on the surface of his mind. "Report," Ash said, his voice cutting through the low hum of anxiety. All eyes snapped to him. "Warden," Brandon said, his tone clipped and formal, but devoid of the earlier judgment. There was a crisis. Hierarchy was now a matter of function. Approximately 20 minutes ago, we registered a massive energy fluctuation originating from the Snowpoint Temple area. All our remote sensors in that psychic quadrant went dark simultaneously. "It wasn't a fluctuation," Annabelle murmured, her voice strained with pain. "It was an erasure. The same void as before, but 100 times larger." A gaping wound. She opened her eyes, and they were clouded with pain. "It's resonating. The ley line that runs from Sinnoh to Kanto is carrying the disturbance. It's like a poison." As if on cue, a shrill alarm blared through the Nexus. Nolan swore under his breath. "We have a problem. A big one." He gestured to the main holographic map, which now pulsed with angry red warning icons. "They're not just attacking Sinnoh. They're here." The map showed the intricate web of ley line energies that crisscrossed the Kanto region, the very network the Battle Frontier was built upon. At 3 key intersections, weak points far from the fortified facilities, 3 red dots blinked in unison. "What are they?" Ash demanded. "I don't know," Noland admitted, typing furiously. "The energy signature is a paradox. It's a massive power source that emits no residual energy. It's like a black hole for esoteric power. It's not destroying the ley lines, it's nullifying them. Creating dead zones. And the feedback is crippling our defensive systems. It's a coordinated attack," Greta growled, her fists clenched. "A siege. They're trying to cut us off," Lucy added, her voice a low hiss from the shadows where she leaned against a wall. "Isolate us. Blind us." Annabelle cried out, a sharp gasp of pain, and slumped forward in her chair. The red icons on the map flared brighter. "It's getting stronger," she whispered. "The static, it's so loud." This was it. The first test. Not a one-on-one battle, but a multi-front assault. Ash felt the weight of every gaze in the room settle on him. They were all powerful, all specialists, but they were looking to him for direction. For a plan. He took a steadying breath, his mind racing, connecting the dots from his strategy session with Greta and Noland. They'd go for the lines connecting them. The weak points in between. He had predicted this. His voice was calm and clear when he spoke, a solid rock in the swirling river of panic. "They want to divide our attention. We won't let them. We'll divide our forces." He strode to the holographic table, his authority radiating not from his title, but from his sudden, absolute certainty. He pointed to the first blinking red dot, located in a dense, remote forest to the east. "Target Alpha. Spencer, Tucker. You're up. Spencer, your connection to the natural world is our best bet for locating the device without technical sensors. Tucker, I need your flair for the dramatic. Arcanine and Swampert can provide area control and a powerful distraction. Get in, find the device, and destroy it. Avoid a prolonged fight. Spencer gave a serene nod, his calm a steadying presence. Tucker, for once, didn't strike a pose. He just gave a sharp, determined grin. The stage is set. We won't disappoint our leading man. Ash's finger moved to the second point, a coastal nexus near a major shipping lane. Target Beta. Greta, Lucy. This location is close to civilian infrastructure. We need speed and precision. Greta, you're the spearhead. Pure overwhelming force. Lucy, you're the scalpel. Use Sevapur and Milotic for tactical disablement of any guards. I want that device neutralized before anyone even knows you were there. Greta met his eyes, and he saw the last vestiges of her skepticism burn away, replaced by the fierce fire of a warrior given a clear objective. Understood. Lucy pushed off the wall, a fluid shadow. They won't see us coming. That leaves target Gamma, Ash said, his finger resting on the largest and most intense red icon, situated in a ring of ancient standing stones atop a windswept hill. The main convergence point. The heart of the network in this quadrant. That's the one causing the most feedback, Annabelle breathed, forcing herself to sit up straighter. It's the source of the pain. Then that's where we're going, Ash said, looking directly at her. You're our compass, Annabelle. Even if it hurts, you're the only one who can feel it. I'll handle the rest. A flicker of surprise and gratitude crossed her pained features. He wasn't sidelining her. He was trusting her, even in her moment of weakness. Paul, Ash said, turning to the silent trainer who had watched the entire exchange with a hawk's intensity. I'm going to sin no, Paul stated, his voice flat and non-negotiable. This started there. I'll find out what happened at Snowpoint Temple. Good, Ash said. It was what he would have ordered anyway. Scott, get him the fastest transport we have. And get me eyes on all 3 Kanto sites. I want a live comms link to every team. You got it, Warden. Scott said, already hammering commands into his own terminal, his showman persona replaced by a surprising efficiency. Within minutes, the Nexus was a hub of directed action. The teams were dispatched. Ash, with Pikachu on his shoulder, helped a still unsteady Annabelle out of the command center and towards a waiting high-speed vehicle. The silent siege had begun, and Ash had just made his first move as a commander, scattering his most powerful assets across the region on nothing more than his own strategic judgment. The weight of that decision was heavier than any mountain. The ride to target Gamma was tense. The vehicle, a rugged all-terrain rover, tore through the countryside, but the silence inside was absolute. Annabelle sat beside him, her head leaning against the cold glass of the window, her breathing shallow. Ash could feel it now, too. The closer they got to the standing stones, the more the very air felt wrong. It was a pressure in his ears, a strange sense of detachment, as if the world was being viewed through a thick pane of glass. His own aura, usually a warm, constant presence just under his skin, felt muted. It was like trying to feel the sun on a day with heavy cloud cover. The connection was there, but it was faint, fuzzy, and cold. We're close, Annabelle whispered, not needing to look at a map. The nothingness, it's like a drain, pulling all the warmth out of the world. The rover screeched to a halt at the base of the hill. The standing stones were visible on the crest, stark silhouettes against the bruised purple sky. The wind that whipped down from the peak carried no sound of birds or rustling leaves. It was a dead wind. Stay here, Ash said, turning to her. I'll handle it. No, she insisted, her voice gaining a sliver of its usual strength. I have to see it. I have to understand what it is. He saw the resolve in her eyes and knew he couldn't argue. He just nodded. Pikachu, stay close. Pika, his partner affirmed, his cheeks sparking weakly, the static discharge less vibrant than usual. They made their way up the hill, the oppressive silence growing with every step. The grass under their feet felt brittle and lifeless. When they reached the circle of stones, they saw it. In the exact center of the ring, a device hovered a foot off the ground. It was a tripod of obsidian-like material, holding a crystalline sphere that pulsed with a visible absence of light. It didn't glow, it absorbed. It drank in the ambient energy, the color, the very life of the world around it, leaving a small perimeter of gray, colorless space. Standing beside it, adjusting a control panel on its surface, was a single figure. They were clad head to toe in a sterile white uniform with sharp, black lines, their face obscured by a smooth, mirrored helmet that reflected the distorted, colorless world around them. The figure moved with an unnerving, clinical precision, like a surgeon performing a routine procedure. Before Ash could even shout a challenge, Annabelle cried out and staggered back, her hands flying to her head. The static. It's inside my head. The figure turned, their mirrored helmet fixing on the intruders. They showed no surprise, no alarm. They simply raised a hand and tapped the side of their helmet. Intrusion detected, a synthesized, genderless voice stated, devoid of all emotion. Target identified, Frontier Brain Annabelle, Psychic Class 7. Neutralize. The figure threw a pokeball. In a flash of red light, their Pokémon appeared. It was a Metagross, but something was terribly wrong with it. Its metallic body had a strange, matte finish that seemed to absorb light. The X on its face wasn't shining silver, it was a flat, dead gray. A low hum emanated from it, a frequency that made Ash's teeth ache. That Metagross. Annabelle gasped, clutching Ash's arm for support. It has no psychic presence. It's a void, like the device. Pikachu, Thunderbolt. Ash commanded instantly. Pikachu leaped from his shoulder, but as he unleashed the bolt of lightning, it seemed to fray. The bolt left his body as a thick, powerful blast, but as it neared the null Metagross, it visibly thinned and dissipated, striking the creature with all the force of a minor static shock. The Metagross didn't even flinch. Resistance is illogical, the operative's synthesized voice announced. This unit's psychic field is inverted. It does not project force, it projects nullification. Your Pokémon's special energies are being cancelled out. Ash felt a chill run down his spine. An anti-psychic Metagross. A Pokémon modified to be a weapon of pure negation. He tried to reach out with his aura, to feel the operative's intent, to sense the Metagross's next move, but it was like staring into a black hole. There was nothing there to sense. He was blind. Annabelle, get back. Ash yelled, pushing her behind one of the ancient stones. He was on his own. No aura, weakened special attacks. Just him, Pikachu, and a decade of battle instinct. Metagross. Engage. Psychic static pulse, the operative commanded. The Metagross's eyes glowed not with psychic energy, but with a dull, gray light. A wave of invisible pressure rolled across the hilltop. Annabelle screamed and collapsed behind the stone, unconscious. Pikachu stumbled, shaking his head as if trying to clear water from his ears. Even Ash felt a wave of vertigo and nausea wash over him. Damn it! Ash snarled. This wasn't a battle, it was a slow dissolution. Pikachu, we have to fight old school. Quick attack, go. There was no grand strategy. No elemental advantage. Just speed and grit. Pikachu shot forward, a yellow blur. Meteor Mash, the operative said calmly. The null Metagross met the charge, one of its massive arms glowing with a faint, steely light. It swung, and the sheer physical power was immense. Pikachu was swatted out of the air like an insect, sent tumbling across the colorless grass. Pikachu. He was tough. He was already getting back up, shaking his head. But he was hurt. Ash's mind raced. He couldn't win a head-on fight. The Metagross was a physical fortress, and its nullifying field crippled their biggest advantage. He needed to change the rules. He looked around, at the ring of ancient stones, at the damp ground. Pikachu, to me. Ash called. As Pikachu scrambled back, Ash pointed at the Metagross. Draw its attention. Quick attack again, but circle it. Don't get close. Pikachu obeyed, becoming a frantic blur circling the hulking steel creature. The Metagross, a being of logic and power, tracked the smaller Pokémon, its heavy body slowly turning, its attention fixed on the immediate threat. A futile diversion, the operative stated. It's not a diversion, Ash yelled, his eyes locked on the ground beneath the Metagross. Now, Pikachu. Iron Tail, on the ground. Right under it. It was a command that made no sense. An attack aimed at nothing. But Pikachu trusted him. He broke off his circling pattern, his tail glowing with a metallic sheen, and slammed it into the soft, damp earth directly beneath the hovering Metagross. The ground didn't explode. It just gave way. The dirt turned to mud, and the heavy Metagross, caught by surprise, lost its stable hovering altitude and dipped, its massive legs sinking into the churned-up earth. It was off balance. For a single, critical second, it was vulnerable. Now. Full power. Volt tackle. Ash roared, pouring every ounce of his will into the command. This was the opening. With the Metagross destabilized and its null field momentarily disrupted by the physical shock, Pikachu was wreathed in a torrent of furious, golden electricity and slammed head-on into the creature's chest. This time, the attack connected. The null field shattered. For the first time, the operative took a physical step back as their Pokémon was lifted off the ground and thrown backward, crashing into the tripod of the null damper. The device shrieked, a high-pitched wail of failing machinery. The sphere flickered, and a wave of pure, unfiltered energy erupted from it, catching both the Metagross and the operative in the blast. The Metagross collapsed, unconscious. The operative was thrown to the ground, their helmet cracking. Before Ash could press the advantage, the operative was already moving. They slapped a device on their belt. A blinding flash of light and a deafening sonic boom erupted from their position. Ash threw an arm over his eyes, and by the time his vision cleared, the operative was gone. Vanished. But they had left something behind. The smoking, deactivated null damper. The unconscious Metagross, which was already beginning to fade in a shimmer of red light as an auto-recall function kicked in. And on the ground where the operative had fallen, a small, black data chip lay gleaming in the now returning sunlight. As the null damper died, life rushed back into the hilltop. Color bled back into the grass. The wind carried the sound of a distant bird. The oppressive pressure vanished. It was like emerging from underwater. Ash's first thought was for Annabelle. He rushed to where she had fallen. She was conscious now, but pale and trembling, the psychic rebound hitting her hard. "It's over," Ash said softly, kneeling beside her. "We stopped it." She looked at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of pain and awe. "How? Its field, your aura." "Couldn't use it," Ash said, picking up the data chip. "Had to rely on the basics." He looked at her, at the way she was shivering, the psychic static still clinging to her like cobwebs. "You're still feeling it, aren't you?" She nodded, wincing. "It's like tangled knots of feedback in my head. Now that the main signal is gone, it's just noise." He hesitated for only a second. He remembered the feeling, the warm, connecting light of his own life force. He had only ever used it to sense, to connect, to fight. Never to heal. But seeing her in such pain, a pain he was beginning to understand, he knew he had to try. He holstered the data chip and knelt in front of her. "Hold still," he said gently. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and reached out, not with his hands, but with his spirit. He let his aura flow from him. It wasn't a blast or a wave. He pictured it as warm, liquid light, and guided it slowly, carefully, towards Annabelle. He didn't try to force the static out. He just let his own calm, steady energy wash over her, a gentle tide against a chaotic shore. He felt the jarring, painful static of her mind, the tangled knots she described. He didn't try to sever them. He focused on a single thought, peace. He let his aura surround the knots, not attacking them, but soothing them, gently loosening them until they began to untangle on their own. Annabel gasped. Her shivering stopped. The tension in her shoulders eased, and the pained lines on her face softened. She stared at him, her psychic senses now clear, feeling his aura not as an attack or a presence, but as a gentle, unbelievably warm embrace. It was a connection more profound than any words she had ever shared with a human. It was a pure, unfiltered glimpse into his spirit, strong, unwavering, and fundamentally kind. How? She whispered, her voice filled with wonder. Ash opened his eyes, feeling a little drained himself. I just tried to help it quiet down. His calm crackled to life. Warden. This is Greta. Target beta neutralized. No casualties. A moment later, another voice. Tucker here, darling. Target Alpha is history. Ash helped Annabel to her feet. She was steady now, her color returning. She didn't let go of his hand. The siege is over, he said into his calm, his voice steady. But the war has just begun. He squeezed Annabel's hand gently. We have their playbook. He held up the data chip. In the returning sunlight, it seemed to absorb the light, a tiny piece of darkness in the palm of his hand. Chapter 4, The Serpent's Coil. The data chip was a Pandora's box of chillingly organized chaos. Back in the Nexus, with the immediate threat neutralized, Noland worked with a feverish intensity to crack its encryption. The Frontier brains, gathered around the central table, watched the main screen as he peeled back layer after layer of security. The silence in the room was heavy, a stark contrast to the frantic energy of just a few hours prior. Annabel sat beside Ash, a quiet and steady presence. The shared experience on the hilltop had forged a new kind of bond between them, an unspoken understanding that bypassed words. She would occasionally glance at him, a complex mixture of gratitude and curiosity in her eyes. I'm in, Noland finally announced, leaning back in his chair. Name of the organization is, the Order of Null. Philosophy is, radical. They view legendary Pokémon not as objects of worship or wonder, but as cosmic anomalies. Unstable variables in the equation of reality. Their goal isn't control. It's erasure. The word sent a chill through the room, echoing Annabel's description of the psychic void. They're purists, Lucy murmured from her spot in the shadows, her voice sharp with dawning comprehension. They want to cleanse the world of what they can't control. It gets worse, Noland said, bringing up a series of fragmented schematics and ancient texts. This is their endgame. A device they call the Divinity Sever. It's powered by 3 esoteric artifacts, the Mute Stone, the Severing Lens, and the Heart of the Unbound. According to these files, the attack on Snowpoint Temple wasn't just a distraction. They were field-testing the Mute Stone, an object capable of silencing a being's connection to its own innate power. They used it to neutralize Regigigas's aura long enough to harvest something. What did they take from Regigigas? Brandon asked, his deep voice rumbling with menace. It doesn't say. Only that, Phase 1 is complete, Noland replied, his face grim. The chip also contains a list of secondary targets. Locations where the veil between worlds is thin, places with high concentrations of divine energy. It's a hit list of legendary habitats. He highlighted one name on the list. Their next priority target is the Whirl Islands. Lugia, Spencer breathed, his usual calm replaced by alarm. Before Ash could formulate a plan, the main doors of the Nexus slid open. It wasn't one of their own this time. A man in a sharply tailored black suit stood there, flanked by 2 armed guards in sleek, gray tactical gear. The man was tall and lean, with silver hair slicked back from a sharp, intelligent face. He carried himself with the unshakable confidence of someone who believed his authority was absolute. "Scott, I believe we had an appointment," the man said, his voice smooth and condescending. His eyes, the color of cold steel, swept across the room, dismissing the assembled brains as curiosities before landing on Ash. "So, this is the new warden. A child playing soldier." Scott hurried forward, his usual affability strained. "Agent Kincaid. We weren't expecting you so soon." "A coordinated, multi-pronged attack on critical infrastructure tends to accelerate my schedule," Kincaid replied, stepping into the room as if he owned it. His guards remained at the door, silent and imposing. "I am Special Agent Kincaid of the International Police, Esoteric Threat Division. The events of the last few hours are now officially under my jurisdiction." Greta took a confrontational step forward. "Your jurisdiction ends where the battle frontiers begins." Kincaid offered a thin, dismissive smile. "An adorable sentiment. The battle frontier is a charming, if dangerously unregulated, private enterprise. You run a glorified tournament. We handle threats to global security. There's a difference in scale." He turned his full attention to Ash. "The Order of Null has been on our radar for months. A fringe group of technozealots. We were monitoring them. Your little militia, however, blundered in and kicked the hornet's nest, forcing their hand. Now we have a crisis." Ash felt a surge of anger, but he kept his voice steady. "We defended our territory and stopped them from crippling Kanto's energy network. What was your task force doing while that was happening?" Kincaid's eyes narrowed. "Gathering intelligence. Preparing a proper, systematic response. Not charging in like a hot-headed toros. My solution is simple: any legendary Pokémon deemed unstable or targeted by the Order of Null will be preemptively captured and contained in a secure, null energy facility until the threat is neutralized." The room went cold. Kincaid's solution was chillingly similar to the Order's own philosophy: imprisonment instead of erasure, but born from the same fundamental belief that these powerful beings were problems to be managed. "You can't be serious," Ash said, his voice dangerously low. "You want to cage them? Like criminals?" "I want to prevent a war between gods from leveling a city," Kincaid countered smoothly. "These creatures are living weapons of mass destruction. To leave them roaming free while a hostile power is actively hunting them is irresponsible. It's a liability I will not permit." He was trying to take over. To absorb the frontier's autonomy through sheer bureaucratic force. This was a new kind of battle, one fought not with Pokémon, but with words and authority. Ash knew that if he lost this fight, the frontier would become nothing more than a glorified precinct of Kincaid's division. The confrontation came to a head at the battle pike. Following the briefing, Kincaid had insisted on a tour of the facilities, which was a poorly disguised inspection. Lucy, the most fiercely independent of the brains, met him at the entrance to her domain. The battle pike was a winding, serpentine building, its interior a maze of unpredictable challenges. It mirrored its master perfectly. "An interesting setup, Pike Queen," Kincaid said, his tone patronizing as he walked down a corridor lined with doors. "Random chance and chaos. A fitting metaphor for this entire organization." Lucy moved with a silent, fluid grace, her eyes never leaving him. "The path is only chaotic to those who don't understand the flow." "And I suppose you do," Kincaid scoffed. "Tell me, what protocols do you have in place for a hostile psychic entity?" "I have a Seviper with poison tail," Lucy replied, her voice flat. "It's a very effective protocol." Kincaid stopped, turning to face her. "That's the problem with you people. You think a Pokémon battle can solve everything. You are amateurs, playing with forces you can't possibly comprehend." He gestured around them. "Effective immediately, I am commandeering this facility's resources. My agents will establish a command post here. Your staff can assist them." Lucy's eyes, already sharp, narrowed into dangerous slits. The air crackled with a tension that had nothing to do with psychic energy. This is my facility. My domain. Your agents will set foot in here when I allow it, and not a moment before. Is that a threat, Queen? Kincaid took a step closer, his hand dropping to the sidearm holstered beneath his jacket. It's a fact. Lucy didn't flinch. Her hand moved subtly, her fingers brushing against the poke ball on her belt. A low, menacing hiss seemed to echo from the very walls of the pike. Before the standoff could erupt into open violence, Ash's voice cut through the tension. Agent Kincaid. He had followed them, anticipating this very clash. He walked into the corridor, Annabel a few steps behind him, his presence calm but absolute. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't issue a threat. He walked until he stood between the two of them, a solid, unshakable barrier. He looked at Kincaid, his gaze level and clear. You're a man who deals in facts, right? Ash began, his tone conversational. Fact 1, the Order of Null is a technologically advanced, ideologically driven enemy. They don't want to capture legendaries, they want to unmake them. Your plan to contain them plays right into their hands. You'd be gathering their targets into convenient holding pens for them. Kincaid opened his mouth to argue, but Ash continued, his voice gaining an edge of steel. Fact 2, you said we kicked the hornet's nest. But my team successfully defended 3 critical sites and stopped a region-wide blackout with 0 casualties, while acquiring actionable intelligence on the enemy's master plan. Your team was, by your own admission, still gathering intel. While you were watching, we were winning. He took a step closer, forcing the taller man to meet his gaze. And fact 3, he said, his voice dropping slightly but losing none of its intensity. This is the battle pike. It belongs to the battle frontier, and it is commanded by Pike Queen Lucy. You do not have the authority to commandeer it, and she is not your subordinate. He paused, letting the words sink in. You are a guest here, Agent Kincaid. Start acting like one. The 2 armed guards behind Kincaid tensed, their hands moving towards their weapons. But Kincaid stared into Ash's eyes and saw no fear, no doubt. He saw the same unshakable certainty he had seen in generals and world leaders. It was the absolute conviction of a commander who knew he was right. Lucy watched the exchange, her expression unreadable, but the tension in her shoulders eased. Ash wasn't just defending her territory. He was defending her authority, her very identity as a frontier brain. He was standing up to this outsider not just as her warden, but as her ally. Kincaid finally broke eye contact, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Your confidence is misplaced, boy. Is it? Ash countered. The data chip says the Order's next target is the Whirl Islands. Your plan is to go in, try to capture Lugia, and probably fail, causing untold collateral damage and making you the villain in the eyes of the local populace. My plan is to protect the islands, anticipate the Order's attack, and stop them before they ever get close to their target. He held up the data chip. I have their playbook. You just have a bad idea. So you can either work with us, or you can get out of our way. But we are going to the Whirl Islands. And we are going to protect Lugia. He turned his back on Kincaid, a calculated, dismissive gesture, and looked at Lucy. Get your team ready. We're heading out in 1 hour. For the first time since Ash had met her, Lucy offered a small, almost imperceptible nod of respect. And in her dark, serpentine eyes, a spark of genuine loyalty began to kindle. The operation at the Whirl Islands was a masterpiece of strategic defense, a direct contrast to the brute force assault Kincaid would have ordered. The islands were a maze of swirling currents and jagged rocks, a nightmare to navigate for outsiders. But for Ash's team, it was a home field advantage. Using Nolan's analysis of the Order's tactics and Spencer's knowledge of the island's natural rhythms, Ash didn't set up a hard perimeter. Instead, he created a web. Greta and her powerful Pokémon patrolled the open waters, a visible, intimidating deterrent. Lucy and her more subtle team, including her stealthy Seviper and swift Crobat, hid within the network of underwater caves, a hidden line of defense. Ash, Annabelle, and Brandon took up a position at the heart of the islands, near the Silver Wing Shrine, the focal point of Lugia's power. Annabelle acted as their early warning system. Her psychic senses, now clear and sharp, were attuned to the slightest unnatural disturbance. "They're here," she said suddenly, her eyes closing. 3 submersible craft, approaching from the deep channel. "They're using some kind of cloaking technology, but I can feel the void. That same null energy signature." "Greta, they're heading your way," Ash said into his comm, "engage." "With pleasure," came the reply. On the main screen in their mobile command post, they watched the satellite feed. 3 small, sleek black submarines were moving swiftly through the water. Suddenly, the water around them erupted. Greta's Macamp and a massive Kingler burst from the depths, landing on the hulls of 2 of the subs. The sheer force of their appearance cracked the viewports. The third sub, seeing its escorts compromised, broke formation and dove deep, making a run for the inner islands. "Lucy, it's heading for the cave system," Ash commanded. "Your show." "Understood," was the cool reply. The sub navigated the treacherous underwater tunnels, its pilot clearly skilled. But as it rounded a blind corner, a shadowy form detached from the cavern wall. Lucy's Drapion. Its massive claws clamped onto the submarine's hull, the screech of metal on metal echoing through the water. Before the sub could react, a Seviper shot out from another crevice, its fangs glowing with purple energy. It didn't try to bite through the hull. It struck the propulsion system, a precision attack that sent a cascade of poison and corrosive acid into the sub's engines. The sub went dead in the water, trapped. Meanwhile, Agent Kincaid had arrived, against Ash's advice, with his own fleet of international police vessels. He saw the chaos, misread the situation entirely, and ordered his teams to secure the hostiles. His boats, clumsy and loud, blundered into the carefully laid web. They were immediately caught in the treacherous currents that Ash's team was using to their advantage. One of Kincaid's vessels nearly ran aground before being warned off by a warning shot of hydro pump from Spencer's Garridos. "Kincaid, pull your forces back." Ash ordered over the comm, "You're compromising the operation. I am taking control of this disaster." Kincaid shot back, his voice tight with fury. But it was too late. The Order of Null had a contingency. As Kincaid's forces created a noisy, chaotic distraction, a single, small figure jetted from the disabled submarine. It was an operative on a high-speed water sled, clutching a device. They were making a final, desperate run for the shrine. "They're going for the Silver Wing." Brandon roared. "I've got it," Ash said. He was already moving. He dove into the churning water, a poke ball in his hand. "Beisel, spotlight." Beisel hit the water and took off like a torpedo. He wasn't just fast, he was agile, using the waves and currents as his personal racetrack. He caught up to the operative in seconds. Aqua Jet. Beisel became a living missile of water, slamming into the sled and sending the operative tumbling into the sea. The device they were holding flew through the air. Ash, treading water, saw it arcing towards him. It was a metal canister, already counting down with blinking red lights. A sonic mine, designed to disorient and harm a creature as sensitive as Lugia. He couldn't let it hit the water. There was no time to call another Pokémon. Acting on pure instinct, he launched himself out of the water and caught the device, cradling it to his chest. He hit the water hard, the impact jarring his teeth. He had it, but the timer was at 2 seconds. He had one option. He took a deep breath, reached out with his aura, and focused it all on the device's internal mechanism. It wasn't a blast, it was a focused, precise burst, aimed at the detonator's circuitry. He felt a sharp, painful jolt as his aura shorted out the electronics. The timer stopped at 0:01. The device was dead. He surfaced, gasping for air, the inert mine clutched in his hand. He had done it. Silence fell over the Whirl Islands. The Order of Null's forces were captured, their plan thwarted. Kincaid, watching from the bridge of his ship, had seen the whole thing on his tactical display. He had seen his own forces bungle the operation, and he had seen Ash Ketchum, child playing soldier, personally dive into the water and disarm a bomb with nothing but his own esoteric abilities. Later, as the sun began to set, Kincaid came ashore. His suit was immaculate, but his pride was in tatters. He walked up to Ash, who was standing with the rest of the Frontier brains on the beach. He didn't apologize. Kincaid wasn't a man who apologized. But he looked at Ash, and for the first time, the condescension was gone from his eyes, replaced by a grudging, infuriated respect. The Order of Null's assets and prisoners are now the property of the International Police, he stated, his voice stiff. We will handle the interrogations. He paused. Your strategy was effective. The battle frontier will retain its operational autonomy for the duration of this crisis. We will coordinate our efforts going forward. It was the closest he could come to admitting he was wrong. He was offering a reluctant alliance. As Kincaid and his men departed, taking the captured Order members with them, Lucy walked over to Ash. She stopped beside him, watching the IP vessels disappear over the horizon. The sea breeze blew a strand of her long, dark hair across her face. You defended my authority, she said, her voice quiet and low, meant only for him. And you trusted me with a critical role in your strategy. You were the best person for the job, Ash replied simply. I trust my team. She turned her head, her dark eyes locking with his. A rare, small, but genuine smile touched her lips. It transformed her face, softening her usually severe features. Good. Because for a leader like you, I would coil around the world and squeeze. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a flirtation. It was a promise. A pledge of allegiance, sworn by the Serpent Queen herself. Ash had faced down a rival, a covert army, and a political shark. In the process, he had not only won the battle but had earned the unwavering loyalty of his most dangerous and independent commander. Chapter 5, The Lake of Tears. The alliance with Kincaid was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it gave the frontier access to the International Police's vast intelligence network. On the other, it meant dealing with Kincaid himself, a man whose reluctant cooperation was almost more grating than his open hostility. The Nexus was now a tense fusion of frontier pragmatism and IP bureaucracy, with Kincaid's agents moving like sterile gray ghosts among the vibrant personalities of the brains. The interrogations are yielding limited results, Kincaid reported during a briefing, his tone clipped. The Order's field operatives are zealots. They believe they are saviors, not terrorists. They speak of their leader, a man they call Silas, with messianic reverence. He gestured to the main screen, where a heavily redacted profile appeared. Silas. Former professor of metaphysical engineering at Celadon University. A genius in esoteric energy theory. Disappeared 5 years ago after a family tragedy. His wife and daughter were killed. Collateral damage in a territorial dispute between a Groudon and a Kyogre that surfaced unexpectedly off the coast of Cinnabar. The information landed with a heavy thud. It wasn't just ideology. It was born from pain. So he hates them, Greta muttered, her arms crossed. He sees them as monsters because they act like forces of nature. He sees them as a cancer, Kincaid corrected. A chaotic element that must be excised for humanity to achieve its true potential. His logic is twisted, but it is internally consistent. And it is very, very persuasive. While Kincaid's agents chased leads, Ash focused on the intel from the recovered data chip, cross-referencing it with reports from Paul, who had become their man on the ground in Sinnoh. The news from the north was bleak. The Snow Point Temple was a dead zone, and the Great Apathy was beginning to spread from the area. Reports from nearby towns spoke of a strange listlessness, a lack of motivation in both people and Pokemon. It was a subtle plague, easily dismissed as a localized phenomenon, but Annabelle felt its psychic echo like a persistent, dull ache. The Order of Null, having failed at the Whirl Islands, had gone silent. Too silent. "It's a feint," Ash said one afternoon, staring at the map. He was tracing the flow of energy from the ley line nexus points. They made a big, loud push for Lugia. They let Kincaid's forces capture their teams. They wanted him to think he had the upper hand. They wanted him to focus on interrogations and asset seizures. While they do what? Brandon asked, his deep voice cutting through the hum of the Nexus. While they use the distraction to hit their real target, Ash murmured. He zoomed in on the map, his eyes following the ley line from Snowpoint all the way to its source. His blood ran cold. Annabelle. The Lake Trio. They have a psychic connection that spans the entire region, don't they? Annabelle, who had been meditating to filter out the background static, opened her eyes. They were wide with sudden fear. Yes. Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf. They are the conduits for knowledge, emotion, and willpower for all of Sinnoh. Their presence is foundational. Paul said the apathy started near Snowpoint, Ash continued, his thoughts racing. What if that wasn't the target? What if it was just the nearest high-energy source to Lake Acuity? To Uxie. As the realization dawned, a piercing, high-priority alarm shrieked through the Nexus. It wasn't a local alert. It was a feed from Paul. His face appeared on the main screen, stark and grim, the wind whipping his hair. He was standing on a shoreline, but the water behind him was unnaturally still and gray. Ash, he yelled over the wind. They didn't go for Acuity. They hit Lake Verity. The camera spun around. The lake, which should have been a vibrant, sparkling blue, was a flat, lifeless gray. The trees surrounding it were colorless, their leaves hanging limp. There was no birdsong, no rustle of life. Just a profound, world-ending silence. What happened? Ash demanded, his heart pounding. I was too late, Paul spat, his voice laced with self-loathing fury. They used Kincaid's victory at the Whirl Islands as a screen. A small team, a single device. They didn't even try to fight me. They just activated it. He pointed the camera at the center of the lake. A faint, oily shimmer was all that remained. They used the mute stone. They captured Mesprit. Captured? Scott gasped. Is it? No, Paul said, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper. Worse. They let it go. But not before they severed it. They cut its ability to project emotion. They didn't kill it. They hollowed it out. At that exact moment, a wave rolled across the world. It didn't start in Sinnoh. It happened everywhere, all at once. Annabelle cried out and collapsed, not from psychic pain, but from a sudden, absolute psychic nothingness. In the Nexus, one of Kincaid's agents dropped a datapad, then simply stared at it on the floor, not bothering to pick it up. Noland, who had been about to run a diagnostic, lowered his hands and stared blankly at his screen. Ash felt it like a physical blow. His own emotions, his fear, his anger, his determination, suddenly felt distant. Muted. As if they belonged to someone else. He looked at Pikachu on his shoulder, and for the first time in his life, he felt a disconnect. He knew he loved his partner, but the feeling of that love was a faint echo, a memory of a song he could no longer hear. The world hadn't lost its color. It had lost its meaning. He looked around the room. Greta, a woman of pure passion and fighting spirit, was staring at her own hands with a look of vacant confusion. Brandon's formidable presence had shrunk, his posture slumped. The vibrant, chaotic energy of the battle frontier had been snuffed out like a candle flame. The age of myth wasn't over. The age of feeling was. The days that followed were a waking nightmare. The Great Apathy, as the media dubbed it, spread like a pandemic of the soul. Global markets fluctuated and then stagnated as traders lost the passion for profit. Artists stared at blank canvases, unable to find inspiration. Families went through the motions of their lives, speaking to each other without affection, eating without taste, living without joy. Crime rates didn't spike, they plummeted. People lacked the anger or greed to commit crimes, but they also lacked the compassion or duty to help one another. The world was becoming a gray, orderly, passionless machine. The battle frontier was not immune. The facilities, once buzzing with energy, were now quiet, sterile places. Battles were technically proficient but lacked all spark. Trainers would command their Pokémon with flat, monotone voices, and the Pokémon would obey with apathetic efficiency. Victories and losses were met with the same indifferent shrug. The crisis created a deep, ugly fissure within the leadership. The Nexus, once a place of tense cooperation, was now a tomb of despair. Kincaid, a man who operated on logic and order, was perversely validated. The world was becoming more like him, and he hated it. His cold efficiency was useless in a world that no longer had the passion to be a threat. The breaking point came during a heated, but passionless, argument. "Your defensive strategy has failed, Ash," Greta said, her voice a monotone drone that was a horrifying parody of her usual fiery tone. She stood before the main map, but her eyes were unfocused. "We protected the islands. We let them do this. This, quiet apocalypse. It's worse than any physical destruction. What would you have had us do, Greta?" Ash countered, his own voice feeling foreign in his ears. "Abandon the islands and let them capture Lugia." "Yes," she said, and a faint flicker of her old fire returned, an ember in a field of ash. "At least that would have been a fight. At least we would have lost in a blaze of glory. This is a surrender. We should be hunting them. We should be taking the fight to them, tearing down their bases, burning their philosophy out of the world. An all-out offensive with no intelligence on their main base of operations is suicide," Kincaid interjected, his voice flat. "It is strategically unsound. And this is better." Greta shot back, gesturing at the dead world outside the window. "Living in a world without spirit. I am the arena tycoon. My entire existence is predicated on guts. On fighting spirit. And you," she pointed a trembling finger at Ash, "are the warden who sat back and let them steal it from the world." The accusation, though delivered with a muted voice, struck Ash harder than any physical blow. He looked at the faces around him. He saw their despair, their listlessness. He felt it in himself. His usual optimism, the boundless well of hope that had fueled him his entire life, was gone. He looked for it and found only a dry, empty hole. Greta was right. He had made a strategic choice, and the cost had been the world's soul. He felt the weight of his crown, not as a responsibility, but as a crushing, unbearable burden. He had failed. He stood up, the movement slow and heavy. "The meeting is over," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He turned and walked out of the Nexus, the silence of the other brains following him like a shroud. He didn't go to his suite. He went to the roof of the central tower, the highest point of the frontier. He needed air, even if the air itself felt stale and meaningless. Pikachu followed him, his usual energetic chirps replaced by a quiet, worried Pika. Ash walked to the edge of the roof and looked out. He saw the sprawling frontier below, the stadiums and facilities laid out like a perfect, lifeless model. In the distance, the ocean was a flat sheet of gray steel. He could see everything, but he felt nothing. No pride in his accomplishments. No fear of the future. Just a vast, hollow emptiness. He thought of his journey. The joy of meeting new Pokémon. The thrill of a close-fought gym battle. The warmth of friendship with Misty and Brock. The fierce rivalry with Gary. All of it felt like watching a movie about someone else's life. The memories were there, the data was intact, but the emotional resonance was gone. Silas and the Order of Null hadn't just attacked the world, they had attacked his very identity. "What's the point, buddy?" he asked softly, looking down at Pikachu. "We fight. We win. We lose. We get back up. But why? If this is all it leads to, what's the reason?" Pikachu looked up at him, his dark eyes filled with a profound, quiet sadness. He couldn't feel the same vibrant joy he always did, but his bond with Ash was older and deeper than Mespri's influence. It was a bond forged in a thunderstorm on the first day of their journey. He nudged his head against Ash's leg. "Pikachu." The sound was soft, but clear. "I'm here." Ash sank to his knees, the concrete cold against his legs. He looked at his partner, truly looked at him. He saw the unwavering loyalty in those little eyes. He saw a flicker of defiance. The apathy had muted their connection, but it hadn't severed it. The core was still there. And then he remembered. Lake Verity. His own connection to Mesprit, Uxie, and Azelf. It was faint, but it was there. He had felt their presence, shared in their power during his Sinnoh journey. He closed his eyes, ignoring the emptiness inside him, and reached out. Not with his aura, but with his memory. He didn't search for what was lost. He focused on what he knew was true. He remembered the feeling of Pikachu's fur the first time they truly connected. He remembered the fierce pride of Charizard finally obeying him. He remembered the exhilarating rush of flying on Staraptor's back. He forced himself to recall the feeling, even if he couldn't feel it now. He built a dam of memory against the tide of nothingness. He didn't go to the empty Lake Verity in Sinnoh. He created it within himself. He pictured the calm water, the green trees. He pictured a small, pink, fairy-like being with its eyes closed, adrift in the center. He didn't try to feel emotion. He just focused on the image of Mesprit, on the concept of emotion. And in the vast, silent void of his mind, he felt a flicker. A tiny, fragile spark. It wasn't happiness or anger. It was something more fundamental. It was purpose. The Order of Null's goal was to make everyone feel as empty as their leader did. To prove that emotion was a flaw, a weakness, a bug in the system. The only way to fight that wasn't with anger or rage. It was with its opposite. Hope. He opened his eyes. The world was still gray. The emptiness was still there. But now, it had a pinprick of light in it. A direction. He stood up, his movements more certain. He looked down at Pikachu, who was watching him with wide, hopeful eyes. Ash managed a small, tired smile. It was the first real expression he'd made in days. "You're right, buddy," he said, scooping his partner up. "They want to make the world feel empty. So we have to be the ones to remind it what it feels like to be full." He returned to the Nexus. The brains were still there, sitting in silence, adrift in their own apathy. Kincaid was gone. Ash walked to the head of the table. He didn't look like a triumphant hero. He looked tired, worn, but the vacant look was gone from his eyes. It had been replaced by a quiet, unbreakable resolve. He didn't give a rousing speech. He didn't have the emotion for it. He spoke quietly, his voice steady and clear. "Greta, you were right," he began, and she looked up, surprised. "I made a choice, and it had a terrible cost. I was trying to prevent a physical threat, and I let an existential one succeed. I failed." He took a breath. The Order of Null thinks emotion is a weakness. They want to prove that a world without it is better, more orderly. They want to make everyone as broken as their leader. We can't beat them by becoming like them. We can't fight them with rage, because that's an emotion they've turned into a weapon against itself. We can't outlogic them, because their logic is born from pain and is absolute. He looked around the table, meeting each of their gazes. We can only beat them by proving them wrong. By being the one thing they believe is impossible, a source of hope in a hopeless world. We're not just fighting against them anymore. We're fighting for everyone else. We have to be the memory of what the world has lost. His words weren't filled with passion, but with a profound clarity that cut through the fog of apathy. He was giving them not a battle plan, but a reason. A purpose. Our new mission isn't just to defeat the Order, he said, his voice gaining strength. It's to restore Mesprit. I don't know how yet. But that is our path. Every action we take, every battle we fight, will be a step towards refilling the world's heart, not just defending its body. Greta stared at him. The flicker of fire in her eyes hadn't grown, but it had steadied. The despair on her face was replaced by a dawning, reluctant determination. She looked at this young man who had just admitted his failure, who wasn't promising an easy victory, but was instead offering a difficult, almost impossible purpose. And for the first time in days, she felt something. It wasn't guts. It was respect. She gave a single, sharp nod. What's the first step, Warden? The question hung in the air, a fragile seed of hope planted in the barren ground of their despair. The fog hadn't lifted, but for the first time, they could see a path through it. Chapter 6, The Logic of Strength. The fragile hope forged in the Nexus was a candle in a hurricane. The world remained a gray, listless place, and the battle frontier's renewed purpose was a lonely resolution against a tide of global apathy. Ash's days were spent in a grueling routine, poring over ancient texts with Spencer, trying to find any lore about restoring a legendary severed essence, running psychic resonance tests with a still-recovering Annabelle, and coordinating with Kincaid's frustratingly slow intelligence network. It felt like trying to build a bridge while standing in quicksand. The breakthrough, when it came, was not from within their ranks. It arrived unannounced, carried on the shoulders of a furious, unwelcome ghost from Ash's past. The alarms in the Nexus blared, signaling an unauthorized high-speed approach. On the main screen, a dot representing a single, powerful Pokémon on a direct flight path was closing in fast. It's not an order signature, Noland reported, his voice flat but focused. It's chaotic. Biological. Just one Pokémon, flying at incredible speed. It's a Staraptor, Ash said quietly, recognizing the flight pattern instantly. He stood up. Let him through. He's coming for me. The brains looked at him, confused, but Ash was already heading for the main entrance of the tower. He stepped out onto the Grand Plaza just as the Pokémon descended, landing with a powerful gust of wind that whipped his jacket. It was a Staraptor, its plumage sleek and its eyes sharp, but it was Paul's Staraptor. And hopping off its back was Paul himself. He looked like hell. His clothes were singed and torn, his face was smudged with grime, and there was a frantic, haunted look in his eyes that Ash had never seen before. The arrogant smirk was gone, replaced by a tight, grim line. This wasn't the rival who had come to test him, this was a soldier coming back from a losing war. You, Paul spat, his voice a low growl. He strode towards Ash, his fists clenched. For a moment, Ash thought Paul was going to hit him. Instead, he shoved a data slate into Ash's chest so hard it made him grunt. Their philosophy is a plague, Paul said, his voice seething with a cold, contained fury. An infection that glorifies weakness. It is an insult to the very concept of strength. Ash took the slate, his eyes locked on Paul's. What happened? I've been hunting them, Paul explained, his words clipped and sharp. Since Lake Verity. I tracked the residual energy signature from the mute stone. It led me to a series of their listening posts, their staging areas across Sinnoh. I saw what this great apathy has done. I saw trainers abandoning their Pokémon, not out of cruelty, but because they just couldn't be bothered anymore. I saw a gym leader forfeit a match because he didn't see the point. They are neutering the world, Ash. Turning it into a paradise for the weak. His anger was different from Greta's. It wasn't about the loss of passion or fighting spirit. For Paul, strength, earned through brutal training, ruthless strategy, and unwavering will, was the highest virtue. The Order of Null wasn't just a threat, it was a philosophical poison, an ideology that sought to invalidate his entire existence by making strength itself irrelevant. I found one of their main strongholds, Paul continued, jabbing a finger at the data slate in Ash's hands. A fortress hidden in the desolate mountains north of Celestic Town. It's where they were analyzing the data from the Mesprit incident. I fought my way in. He gestured to his torn clothes. Their defenses are efficient. Automated turrets, null energy fields, Pokemon modified to be unfeeling tactical units. I lost 2 of my team just getting to the central server. A flicker of genuine pain crossed his face, gone as quickly as it appeared. I downloaded everything I could before I was forced to retreat. It's all on there. Schematics, troop movements, and the location of their next major move. They've found the second artifact. The severing lens. Ash looked down at the slate, then back at Paul. Why bring this to me? Why not go to the Pokemon League? Or Kincaid? A humorless, bitter laugh escaped Paul's lips. The League is a bureaucratic corpse, paralyzed by the apathy. And Kincaid? I've seen his agents. They move like automatons, following orders without conviction. They are useless. You, he said, and the word was filled with a grudging, infuriated respect, are the only other person on this planet I've met who seems to understand what's at stake. You and your crew of fanatics are the only ones still fighting. This isn't a truce. It's not friendship. His dark eyes bored into Ash's. It's pragmatism. Their philosophy is a plague on the strong. I will see it burned out of existence. And right now, you are the most effective weapon I have at my disposal. It was the most Paul thing Ash had ever heard. He wasn't asking for help, he was making a strategic alliance. Ash nodded slowly. An army that wants to unmake the world, led by a man named Silas, he said, testing the waters. I met him, Paul replied, and a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold ran down his spine. A projection, in the command center. He didn't threaten me. He didn't gloat. He tried to recruit me. Paul's voice was low, filled with a deep disgust. He showed me his vision. A world without the tyranny of the gods. A world where the random, chaotic power of legendaries couldn't interfere. A world where only earned strength, the kind you build through training and discipline, mattered. He tried to sell me on a world built for me. What did you say? Ash asked. I told him he wanted to make the world weak so he could feel strong, Paul snarled. And then I blew up his server room. This was it. The opening they needed. Not just intelligence, but a guide. An unwilling, hostile, but incredibly effective ally. Get your Pokemon to the infirmary, Ash said, his voice taking on the tone of command. Then meet me in the Nexus in 1 hour. We're planning a counterstrike. Paul stared at him for a long second, then gave a single, sharp nod. He wasn't taking orders, but he was agreeing to the plan. He turned and walked away, his back rigid. The raid on the Order of Null Sinnoh Fortress was a surgical strike, not a full-scale invasion. Ash knew he couldn't risk a large force, secrecy and speed were paramount. He chose his team carefully. Greta, for her mastery of offensive tactics and her unwavering, renewed purpose. Lucy, for her expertise in infiltration and silent takedowns. And, to everyone's shock, Paul. They flew on the back of Ash's Charizard and Paul's Staraptor, a small, elite team streaking across the sky towards the frozen peaks of Sinnoh. The tension between the 4 of them was thick enough to cut with a knife. Greta saw Paul as the embodiment of everything she disliked in a trainer. Lucy watched him with the cool, appraising gaze of a predator sizing up another. And Paul simply ignored them, his focus entirely on the mission. Ash was the bridge, the commander holding this volatile mix together. The fortress was exactly as Paul had described it, a brutalist scar of black metal and gray concrete carved into the side of a glacier, almost invisible against the rock and ice. Automated turrets scanned the perimeter, their red lights sweeping across the desolate landscape. Their outer defenses are motion and heat sensitive, Paul explained, his voice a low whisper as they huddled behind a rock outcropping. But they're programmed for ground and low-altitude approach. They won't be expecting an attack from directly above. A blind spot, Lucy murmured, a hint of professional appreciation in her tone. We go in fast and hard, Ash laid out the plan. Greta, you and your Hariyama will punch a hole in the main hangar bay. Your job is to create a loud, overwhelming diversion on the west side. Draw their primary response teams. Greta grinned, a feral, eager expression that was a welcome sight after weeks of apathy. A loud diversion. I was born for this. Lucy, Ash continued, you and Paul will infiltrate through the east side ventilation system. Paul, you know the layout. Get Lucy to the central command center. Your objective is to disable their internal security and locate the severing lens. Do not engage Silas directly. My objective is to acquire the target, Paul corrected, his jaw tight. I'll handle whatever gets in my way. And what about you, Warden? Lucy asked. Her serpentine gaze fixed on him. I'm going for the head, Ash said, his expression grim. The intel says Silas is overseeing the lens's calibration from a private lab in the core of the facility. I'm going to pay him a visit. It was a risky plan, splitting their small force into three, but it was the only way. They synchronized their watches. Go, Ash said. The attack was chaos and precision intertwined. Greta and Hariyama burst through the hangar wall like a force of nature, a whirlwind of flying metal and fighting-type fury. Alarms blared as order operatives in their sterile white uniforms swarmed towards the breach, just as planned. On the other side of the fortress, Lucy and Paul moved like ghosts. Lucy's Crobat disabled the ventilation fans with a silent cross-poison, allowing them to slip into the maze of ducts. They moved with a chilling efficiency, Paul's knowledge of the layout perfectly complementing Lucy's skill in silent infiltration. They were a terrifyingly effective team. Ash went in through the roof. Charizard melted a hole through the reinforced steel with a concentrated burst of fire, and Ash and Pikachu dropped into the heart of the complex. The corridors were sterile white, silent and cold. He was in the lion's den. Using his aura, which felt clearer and sharper in the face of direct conflict, he navigated the hallways, sensing the void signature of the modified Pokémon and the cold, empty minds of the operatives. He found the lab without incident. Too easily. The door slid open before he even touched it. The room was vast and circular, the walls lined with humming, inscrutable machinery. In the center, suspended in a beam of shimmering energy, was a complex crystal lens, easily 10 feet in diameter. It seemed to bend the light around it, making the air waver. The severing lens. And standing before it, his back to Ash, was a man in a simple gray lab coat. He was tall, with receding brown hair and the weary posture of an academic who had spent too many nights hunched over his work. He didn't turn around. Ash Ketchum, Silas said, his voice calm, reasonable, and utterly devoid of passion. It was the voice of a man who had dissected his own grief and found nothing but cold, hard logic. The boy who talks to gods. I've been looking forward to meeting you. He turned, and his face was ordinary. There were no scars, no maniacal gleam in his eyes. Just a profound, soul-deep tiredness. I must confess, I'm disappointed. I expected a being of immense aura, a chosen one. But you're just a boy. A boy with a dangerous pet. Pikachu bristled, his cheeks sparking. Pika. He's my friend, Ash said, his hand resting on a pokeball. A charming sentiment, Silas replied with a dismissive wave. But ultimately, an irrational one. Friendship, love, loyalty, they are biochemical reactions, designed to promote species propagation. They are also the source of all conflict, all pain, all chaos. He gestured to the humming lens. I am simply offering the world a cure. This was his weapon. Not a Pokemon, not a machine. His voice. His unshakable, reasonable, broken logic. My family died because two of your gods had a squabble, Silas said, his voice as flat as if he were discussing the weather. An event of cosmic importance to them, a footnote to reality for me. It broke me. It shattered my world. And in that brokenness, I found clarity. The gods are a bug in the system. A flaw in the source code of reality. I am the patch that will fix it. You didn't fix anything, Ash shot back. You broke the world. You took away joy, love. And with it, I took away grief. Pain. Despair, Silas finished. A fair trade, wouldn't you say? A world of quiet, orderly contentment, free from the highs of mania and the lows of agony. A perfectly balanced equation. He looked past Ash, his gaze seeming to pierce through the walls of the fortress. Even your rival, the boy who worships at the altar of strength, is beginning to see the logic. In a world without divine intervention, his power would be absolute. The strong would truly rule the weak. I offered him that. A world built for him. From a speaker in the ceiling, Paul's voice suddenly crackled. You want to make the world weak so you can feel strong. Silas's calm expression finally flickered. He glanced at a security monitor, which showed Lucy and Paul in the now darkened command center, standing over a sparking console. It seems your allies have been busy. Now, Lucy. Paul's voice commanded. The lights in the lab flickered and died, replaced by the red glow of emergency lighting. The beam holding the severing lens wavered. A minor inconvenience, Silas said, tapping a command into a wrist-mounted device. The main door slammed shut. From panels in the walls, two Pokemon emerged. Two Metagross. But these were different from the one Ash had faced before. They were sleeker, darker, and the null energy field they projected was so powerful it made Ash's skin crawl. My personal guard, Silas explained. Perfectly modified. They feel no pain, no fear, no loyalty. They simply obey. They are the future. Just as the two Metagross began to advance, a section of the wall exploded inwards. Paul stood in the breach, his electivire crackling with power beside him. Your security is sloppy, Paul sneered. The two Metagross immediately split their focus, one turning to face Paul, the other continuing its advance on Ash. Infernape, I choose you. Ash roared. The battle that followed was a chaotic symphony of controlled fury. Ash and Paul, back to back, a spontaneous, unlikely alliance forged in the heart of the enemy's fortress. Their styles were a study in contrasts. Paul was a cold tactician, calling out commands for Electivire to exploit every fractional weakness. Ash was an intuitive storm, his bond with Infernape allowing them to adapt and react with blistering speed. Electivire, Thunder Punch on its left flank. It's overcompensating. Infernape, dodge and use Mach Punch. Get inside its guard. They were brutally, terrifyingly effective together. Infernape's fiery speed and Paul's Electivire's raw power overwhelmed the first Metagross. The second, a more advanced model with an enhanced null field, proved tougher. It fought with a cold, terrifying logic, countering their every move. Its field is dampening our attacks. Ash yelled over the din of battle. Then we don't use special attacks. Paul retorted. Electivire, get in close. Use your fists. While they fought, Silas simply watched, his expression one of detached curiosity, like a scientist observing a particularly interesting reaction. He made no move to escape. Finally, a combined Flare Blitz and Giga Impact slammed into the final Metagross, sending it crashing into the machinery holding the severing lens. The containment field shattered. The massive crystal fell, cracking as it hit the floor. An alarm, higher and more frantic than before, shrieked through the facility. Containment failure. Reality anchor destabilizing. Fortress self-destruct sequence initiated. It seems our time is up, Silas said calmly, as if he hadn't just lost his life's work. He tapped his wrist device. A shame. But the data is already backed up. A pillar of light enveloped him, the telltale sign of a high-tech teleporter. Until next time, Ash Ketchum. Ponder my question, is a world of ecstatic highs worth the price of crushing lows? He vanished. We have to go. Now. Paul yelled. They fought their way out, reuniting with Greta and Lucy in the hangar bay. The fortress was tearing itself apart around them, explosions rocking the glacier itself. They piled onto Charizard and Staraptor and blasted out of the hangar just as a massive secondary explosion consumed the entire mountain peak in a ball of white fire. They flew in silence for a long time, the cold air washing over them. They had won. They had destroyed the fortress and, more importantly, they had shattered the severing lens. But Silas had escaped. And he had the final artifact he needed, the data harvested from Regigigas. Paul finally broke the silence. He flew his Staraptor up alongside Ash's Charizard. He looked at Ash, his expression a complex mask of grudging respect and frustration. Your strategy was sound, he admitted, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. And your Infernape has improved. It was the closest Paul could ever come to a compliment. He had come to expose Ash as a fraud and had ended up fighting by his side, an unwilling partner in a war against a philosophy that disgusted them both for entirely different reasons. The logic of strength had led him to an unlikely, and deeply irritating, alliance. Chapter 7, The Unmaking the Victory in Sinnoh was a cold comfort. They had destroyed the severing lens, but the knowledge of how to build it now existed in the hands of a man who could teleport at will. They had won a battle, but Silas was already preparing for the next stage of the war. The mood in the Nexus was a grim mixture of resolve and exhaustion. The apathy still clung to the world like a shroud, and their small victory had done nothing to lift it. He's not rebuilding. He's accelerating, Nolan said, his fingers flying across a holographic interface. He was analyzing the fragments of data Paul had salvaged. The information he took from Regigigas, it wasn't just energy data. It was a key. A temporal spatial resonance key. In English, Nolan, Greta said, her patience worn thin. Regigigas is a continental titan. It moves land masses, but it does so by subtly warping space around itself. It's a low-level form of spatial manipulation, Nolan explained, his eyes wide with a terrifying understanding. Silas used the mute stone to get close enough to copy that ability's energy signature. He doesn't need the original severing lens anymore. He's building a new, Divinity Sever, a bigger one, and he's going to use the key from Regigigas to install it not in our world, but in a place where the laws of physics are already suggestions. A map appeared on the main screen, but it was unlike any they had seen before. It was a chaotic, swirling vortex of impossible geometry and dark energy. The distortion world, Spencer breathed, his usual calm finally breaking. Giratina's domain. It's the perfect place for him, Paul stated, his voice a low growl. He had remained at the frontier, a tense and brooding presence. A world between worlds. From there, he can access the foundational pillars of reality itself without having to break through our dimension's natural defenses. And we found his target, Kincaid added, stepping forward. For once, his voice was devoid of arrogance, replaced by the grim tone of a man facing an extinction-level event. Our deep space observatories picked up a massive energy buildup, focused on a single point in spacetime. All our theoretical models point to one conclusion. He brought up an image of a magnificent, bipedal Pokémon, its body adorned with pearls that pulsed with a luminous pink light. Palkia. The master of space. Silas isn't just trying to sever a legendary's power anymore. He's trying to sever space itself. He wants to unravel reality at the seams, then reweave it according to his own, passionless design. The scale of it was unimaginable. It was no longer about saving a Pokemon or stopping a terrorist. It was about saving existence from being unmade. And there's a complication, Annabelle said, her hand pressed to her temple. The apathy made her psychic sense weak, but this new threat was so immense it cut through the fog. Giratina. It's enraged. The intrusion into its home, the massive energy buildup, it's on a rampage. It sees Silas's machine as a cancer in its dimension, and it's trying to destroy it, but its chaotic attacks are only making the spatial distortions worse. This was the endgame. A multi-front war across dimensions. We can't fight him on his turf, Greta argued. We don't know the terrain, the physics. No, Ash said, his voice cutting through the rising panic. He looked at the swirling map of the distortion world. He looked at the image of Palkia. His mind was a whirlwind of tactics, possibilities, and desperate gambles. Then, it settled into a terrifying clarity. We all can't. But I can. All eyes turned to him. This is how it ends, he said, his voice imbued with the absolute authority of the Warden. We can't let Silas and Giratina fight it out. The collateral damage would shatter both worlds. We need to split them up, contain the threats, and cut the head off the snake. This is a coordinated assault, and everyone has a role. He pointed to the assembled brains. Noland, Spencer, Tucker, you are Team Alpha. Your job is containment. The Divinity Sever is already causing spatial rifts to bleed into our world. I need you to lead teams to those hotspots and contain them. Use your Pokemon's abilities to stabilize the environment. You're not fighting, you're doing damage control. You are the shield. He turned to Kincaid. Agent Kincaid, your forces are Team Bravo. Silas will have ground forces guarding the primary anchor point for his machine, the place where it physically connects to our world. I need you to engage them. Keep them busy. Your men are disciplined. Use that. You are the line. His gaze fell on Paul. Paul. You know how to fight with overwhelming power. You understand raw strength better than anyone. Giratina is pure, chaotic rage. A conventional battle is useless. You need to meet its force with your own. You're not trying to beat it. You're trying to occupy it. Give me the time I need. You are the storm. Paul stared at him, a muscle twitching in his jaw. He was being ordered to fight a god, to be a distraction. The old Paul would have scoffed. But this Paul saw the cold, hard logic in it. He saw his role in the grand strategy. He gave a single, sharp nod. That leaves the Divinity Sever, Lucy said, her voice a low hiss. And Silas. That's my job, Ash said. He looked at the remaining brains, Greta, Lucy, Annabelle, and Brandon. I need an honor guard. A fire team to get me to the heart of the distortion world, to the machine itself. Brandon, your Regis are bulwarks against raw power, you'll be our defense. Greta, you're our offense. Lucy, you'll guide us through the shifting chaos. Annabelle, you are our compass. Your senses are the only map we'll have. He took a breath. I'm going to face Silas. And I'm going to end this. There were no more arguments. The plan was insane, desperate, but it was a plan. It was a declaration of war against the end of the world. The entry point was a shimmering, ugly tear in reality located in the ruins of the spear pillar. It rippled like a heat haze, the air around it cold and smelling of ozone. Kincaid's forces had already engaged the Order of Null soldiers guarding it, the air filled with the sounds of battle. Paul was the first to go through. With his 6 most powerful Pokémon at his side, he didn't hesitate. He simply walked into the shimmering portal and vanished, on his way to challenge a god. Ash turned to his team. Let's go. They plunged into the rift. The transition was sickening. It felt like being turned inside out. They emerged into a world of madness. They were on a floating island of rock, drifting in a void of swirling purple and black clouds. Below them, platforms and debris drifted at impossible angles. Gravity was a suggestion, not a law. In the distance, they could see it, a monstrous contraption of black metal and humming energy, miles wide, anchored to a massive, stable landmass. The Divinity Sever. A beam of pure, white-hot energy was already firing from its core, lancing across the void towards a point in spacetime that was visibly tearing open. That was the beam aimed at Palkia. And miles away from it, a battle of titans was raging. Paul's Electivire, looking like a toy, was locked in combat with the colossal, serpentine form of Giratina. Explosions of electricity and shadowy energy lit up the dark sky. Paul was holding his own. He was buying them time. "Annabelle, where's the control room?" Ash yelled over the dimensional roar. "That way," she pointed, her eyes squeezed shut in concentration. "At the base of the main spire. The energy is thickest there. Greta, Lucy, clear a path. Brandon, cover our backs." Their journey across the distortion world was a fever dream. They leaped from floating rock to floating rock, Lucy's Crobat and Ash's Staraptor carrying them across impossible gaps. They were assailed by wild, aggressive Pokémon native to this dimension, creatures of shadow and fear. Greta's Hariyama and Macamp were a whirlwind of destruction, punching through swarms of them, while Brandon's Registeel formed an unbreachable wall against any that got too close. They finally reached the main platform, a sprawling complex of black metal. Order operatives and null Pokémon swarmed them. "We'll hold them off." Brandon roared, his Regirock slamming the ground and creating a stone barricade. "Go, Warden. Fulfill your duty." Greta and Lucy stood with him, a formidable trio. "This is our fight now." Greta yelled, a savage grin on her face. "Go." Ash didn't hesitate. He, Annabelle, and Pikachu sprinted towards the central spire. They burst into the control room to a scene of calm, sterile focus. Silas stood at a console, his back to them, observing the energy beam on a massive screen. He was flanked by a single Pokémon, his personal Metagross, its body radiating a null field so powerful it felt like a physical weight. "Right on schedule," Silas said without turning. "You see. This is the beauty of a world governed by logic. Predictability. I knew you would come." "It's over, Silas." Ash yelled. "Shut it down." "Over?" Silas turned, a look of genuine pity on his face. "My dear boy, it's just beginning. The unmaking is at 80%. Palkia's hold on a stable spatial dimension is failing. Soon, I will be able to reweave it all. A perfect, silent, beautiful world." Annabelle gasped and stumbled, the null field overwhelming her. "Ash. I can't." She collapsed, her psychic sense finally severed by the sheer oppressive force. "Pikachu, you know what to do." Ash yelled. "Pika." His partner shot forward, cheeks sparking. "Metagross, contain the rodent," Silas ordered calmly. The null Metagross moved to intercept, its cold, logical eyes fixed on Pikachu. The final battle began, a frantic clash of lightning and steel in the heart of the Doomsday Machine. But Ash knew, deep down, they couldn't win this way. The Metagross was too strong, its field too absolute. He couldn't even get close to Silas. He watched the main screen. The unmaking was at 90%. The fabric of space was screaming. He saw flashes of Paul's Electivire being swatted aside by Giratina's tail. He saw Greta's Hariyama overwhelmed by null Pokémon. He was out of time. He was out of options. He looked at Pikachu, valiantly fighting a losing battle. He looked at Silas, a man so broken he wanted to break the world to match. And he looked at the humming core of the Divinity Sever, a vortex of anti-energy designed to unmake gods. And in that moment of absolute desperation, a new path became clear. A terrible, sacrificial path. He wasn't strong enough to destroy the machine. He couldn't overpower it. But the machine was designed to unmake divine energy, the very fabric of legendary power. His own aura, it was the essence of life, of connection. It was the antithesis of everything the machine was. What would happen if a pure, untainted source of life was fed directly into a machine designed to create nothingness? Pikachu! Ash screamed, his voice raw with a desperate command. Hold it off. Don't let it get to me. Pikachu heard the finality in his tone. With a defiant roar, he unleashed a volt tackle of pure, suicidal desperation, slamming into the Metagross, not to win, but to buy seconds. Ash ran. He didn't run at Silas. He ran directly at the humming, terrifying core of the Divinity Sever. What are you doing? Silas asked, his calm finally breaking with confusion. That is a concentrated null energy field. It will erase you from existence. Ash didn't answer. He reached the core, a swirling vortex of black energy that felt like absolute cold. He didn't hesitate. He plunged both of his hands into it. Pain. It was not a sensation. It was the entirety of his existence. A fire that burned away his soul. The machine did what it was designed to do, it began to unmake him. He felt his memories fraying, his sense of self dissolving. He felt his connection to Pikachu, his oldest and deepest bond, beginning to stretch and tear. But he held on. He closed his eyes and poured. He didn't fight the machine. He fed it. He opened the floodgates of his own life force, his aura, and channeled all of it, every memory, every emotion, every victory, every defeat, every friendship, into the machine's heart. He poured the warmth of his mother's love, the fire of his rivalry with Paul, the quiet strength of his bond with Annabelle, the fierce loyalty of all his Pokémon. He poured life into the engine of death. It was like pouring water into a running engine. The machine sputtered. The pure, chaotic, emotional energy of his aura was something its logic could not compute. It was anathema to its purpose. The mute stone, designed to silence ordered energy, cracked under the strain of this chaotic, emotional flood. The Regigigas key, a map of stable space, fractured as it was inundated with the messy, illogical energy of life. Silas watched in horror, his logical world crumbling. No. It's not possible. Your energy is unstructured. It's chaotic. It should have been neutralized. That's the point. Ash roared, his voice barely human, a sound of pure, agonized willpower. With a final, defiant surge, he poured the last of his strength, the very core of his being, into the machine. The Divinity Sever screamed. Not a mechanical wail, but a sound of pure, metaphysical agony. The core overloaded. The mute stone shattered. The severing lens, reformed through technology, cracked and exploded. The machine backfired. A wave of energy, not of nullification but of pure, unfiltered life, erupted from the core. It didn't destroy. It restored. The beam aimed at Palkia vanished. The control room's lights returned to normal. The oppressive null field disappeared. The wave washed over Silas. It didn't harm him. It slammed into the core of his being, into the cold, logical walls he had built around his pain. It didn't shatter them. It dissolved them. The backfiring machine, designed to sever divinity, had instead severed his connection to the grief that had defined him for 5 long years. He stumbled back, his eyes wide, the profound tiredness on his face replaced by a sudden, terrifying emptiness. The man who had wanted to unmake the world had instead been unmade himself. The wave washed over Ash. But for him, there was only darkness. Having poured out everything he was, he collapsed, a hollow, empty shell. His last conscious thought was of a small, yellow mouse, crying his name. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.